like I find that the preamble conversation, I find that's
Yeah, hold
interesting
on. Hit
too.
record now. Hit record now. Hit record
Yeah,
now. All
it's
right.
we're recording.
All right.
So yeah. Eddie Shiomi, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. I'm good, JJ. It's been forever.
I know. When was the last time
Weren't you
I
at Deutsche Bank or something at some point when I
yeah,
first met you? Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
That's where I
Okay.
was when I did the Coro thing.
Right.
Um Actually, before I got into the Coro program,
Hmm.
we um we were consulting with you guys.
The Deutsche Bank program. Right.
Yeah, so the graduate training program, the associate training program,
Oh, yeah.
um, they wanted to do something different, like where they sent out the associates in training out into the community-based organizations to do some sort of like consulting work or something like that. Um, I forget what we ended up doing, but yeah, we brought you in. Oh no, we did work with you. We worked with
No, no, we
you.
did. I still have PTSD from that. It was not a good cultural fit, and that was a huge learning I took later on in my private sector work because first year post MBA at Deutsche Bank on the 10th week of their 12-week orientation or whatever the heck it was,
Something
are
like
not
that.
ready, do not have much bandwidth to do anything, and it was really interesting. So yeah, I mean, we did these sort of neighborhood immersions, like we took them out into New York City and gave them some assignments and stuff like that. I felt like though a lot of them were ready just to hit the trading desk or whatever and get going because concurrent with that, they're getting talked at by a lot of other people. And they also know that their job security is limited in that they have to perform, and the person to their left and their right are going to be, it's a zero sum game. And so a lot of things built on trust weren't working. It was
Yeah.
really weird. But no, it was good. I mean, I learned a lot about the fact that Coro curates a particular type of individual in a certain place in their life. And our trainings are designed for that, but we have to adapt to all different walks of life a lot more. And so when I ended up, you might know, I worked for Andrew Yang at Venture for America, his first social venture.
I
I
did
took that
not,
into account.
yeah, I did not know that until I started looking at the pictures that you sent.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but I think you knew Andrew Yang even before that, right? You guys played
Yeah,
basketball
yeah.
together? Yeah.
Andrew was one of my first friends actually in New York. I guess it's long form, so I can ramble a little bit, right?
Absolutely. Ramble
Yeah.
on.
So,
Yeah.
so I was born and raised in Los Angeles and came to New York in my late 20s in 2002. So literally about a year after 9/11. And, one of the things that's hard, because I'm Japanese American in terms of my Asian Americanness, there's not really Japanese Americans here. Like they're Japanese people, like they come from Japan or they are restaurateurs or stuff like that.
Right.
It's not a massive community like in California. And so I missed community service because it's so easy to do it there. Not to say I only do Japanese American community stuff, but like I didn't understand it in New York. And so I volunteered for this organization that was running a children or youth stuff or something called NAP, National Asian American. It's like
Okay.
it's like a young professionals Asian group.
Yeah.
And I showed up at this meeting before their sports day or youth day or something, youth programming, and I just wanted to volunteer, and I ended up leaving being in charge of it. Because it was clearly not it kind of thing. It's like whoever
Yeah.
is a fool enough to step up, and I go, I'll do it. It's a good opportunity to meet people, and I have experience with this stuff back in LA, so I did that. And one of my first main volunteers was Andrew. Andrew at that point, I think, was he just quit his law firm job and it was at a startup. And he was probably teaching at Manhattan GMAT as a GMAT professor or GMAT instructor.
Okay.
And so he was also running this nightclub business. Like he was doing all these after party events.
That's funny.
Yeah. And so he was in charge of the after party for that event. And so he started out as my sports volunteer, but then he, ran the after party, and I
That's
went over
right.
there.
I think he talks about it in one of his interviews. I think it's he and his brother, I think they were running some.
Well,
I think
that was Star Giving. That was their startup. It was basically to try to get Hollywood stars to donate money. But
maybe, yeah.
he had a lot of things in the air. He
Yeah.
was, I think at some point he was also part of a health startup,
Yeah.
which failed, and that became the origins of Venture for America. And his brother is in health. He's an NYU professor now, a tenured NYU professor in healthcare, health something policy. But I think it was him and Brian Yang. Brian Yang is the producer of Linsanity. He's a big sort of Asian producer. He did Chloe Kim's documentary. He did Andrew's, currently is doing his documentary, I guess. He's been shadowing him since the beginning. So he and Andrew definitely were involved in that when Brian was living here. Yeah, I don't know, but I basically knew him briefly there, and then a year later I ran into him on the street. He was leaving this event and I was coming, and then we talked, and I go, "You look familiar." And then long story short, he invited me to his basketball run, which he did regularly with his friends.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was doing that for about 15 years. I saw him every weekend and we were social. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I remember when you were at Coro, and when I knew you back in the day, you were talking about that, how like on the weekends you play basketball with a bunch of Wall Street types.
Yeah, that was Andrew's run. I don't know. Yeah, they were Wall Street types. Yeah, they all became the Venture for America board. So people working in private equity or stuff like that. I was a bit different. I was a nonprofit guy, but it was a good run. I enjoyed it. Like in the summers, we'd play at this playground across, outside of his apartment in Hell's Kitchen, and got to know a lot of people that were still my friends today. So yeah. I mean, it goes way back with him, as I mentioned in sort of a narrative I summarized for you.
Yeah. Did you know at that time that, had any inkling that he might ever run for public office? Yeah,
No.
he probably didn't even know either. Yeah.
No, he didn't even know Adventure for America, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know Andrew really well. I was at his bachelor party. He was at my wedding. I was at his. I believe actually I might have been with him on his first date with his wife. It's a longer story. I think we were. It's like a group.
It's a group thing. Okay.
Yeah, we were all hanging out, and he said, "I'm going to meet this person," and it was like a group of guys and girls. It's weird, but I know Evelyn really well and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm almost positive he didn't think he was going to run for office, because at that point I think he just wanted to put a stake in the ground and ensuring his financial future, right? And so he, when he exited, when he helped sell Manhattan GMAT to Washington Post Kaplan, he had his nest egg or whatever, and that gave him the freedom to then do Venture for America, which is the passion project. Yeah. And
so even his GMAT thing was a business that he was running, so it wasn't like.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, he didn't have a passion for test prep, I don't think.
Okay. Yeah, so he seems like almost everything except for his stint in law, in a law firm. Everything he does seems very entrepreneurial,
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean,
at least it comes across that way.
He's a very creative person. Like he's very good at synthesizing a lot of different things happening at the same time. So, at the time when I was playing basketball with him, I didn't even know what he did. I mean, when you play pickup basketball with guys, you don't know what they do. You just know them for their game. Like, oh yeah, Andrew has that good jump shot from the corner, right? Or Pat is good at posting up. And, I got insights into what he did when I went to parties at his place, all the people, who are all these people? They all seem to be taking the GMAT right now, right? And I'm just kind of like, what's going on? Oh yeah, you work for them, right? Oh yeah. And then, after he sold his company, he had this, I think he invited a lot of people out for a celebration. I just can't remember exactly. And then he actually came to a Coro event, a selection day.
Mm-hmm.
And he always would mention to me, wow, I really like what you're doing with the fellows program. I think it's such a great program and great thing. And then that was part of, because he was thinking about Venture for America and the model it would take, and realized it had to be
I
a
see.
nonprofit fellowship model, not a private entity. So
I see. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Pretty cool.
Hmm.
Yeah, you know, what I'm finding as I'm having these one-on-one conversations on my podcast, what I'm finding is like everyone I know has such interesting stories. I mean, you know, I kind of have an inkling, and the people that I talk to, I know them, you know, I knew them at some point and we sort of, you know, loosely kept in touch, or I know them very well. And
Yeah.
so I know some things about their lives, and that's why I approach them. But once you, because you know these 3 hour long one-on-one conversations is not something that you have on a day-to-day basis. Like even if I see you every day, like
Yeah.
let's say we were coworkers, like we would
Yeah.
have chit chats, but we
Yep.
wouldn't sit down for 3 hours and talk about, you know,
No.
anything in particular. And
No.
so, yeah, so when you start having, even with people that I know very well, when I start having these conversations, it's like there's so much under the surface, you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, long form in general is disappearing. And it's funny, while I was programming, I was VP at Venture for America. I was in charge of learning and content for the fellows. And what we realized is, like, particularly in the startup world, people get information in the moment, and that's practical. It's like
Yes.
short articles. They Google, they look up something. And what we try to do, which I thought was actually a really good idea, is because we're trying to train the entrepreneurs, we needed them to absorb long form data. So like books, like
Yeah.
Crossing the Chasm or Innovator's Dilemma, you know, that kind of stuff, which like at first seems like, ugh, it's a book, what? But it's so much richer. It's like, even the fellows appreciate it. They were like, wow, this was really great. I don't get this from a Seth Godin post or a Fred Wilson post. You know, it's like
Right.
a true epic narrative, and I think that's what you're doing here, JJ. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think in some ways I think it has sort of eroded this long form conversation, you know, type things. But in some ways I think it's coming back. Because I think there, I mean, there are plenty of podcasts out there where it is long form. I
Mhm.
think though most of it is maybe driven by specific topics though.
Sure.
So the only one that I know that I listen to on a regular basis where it is just plainly long form and just conversational is Joe Rogan's podcast.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, other than that, the other ones that I listen to, they're more topical. They're either political or news driven or topic driven, so they kind of delve into
Well, Joe's topic kind of driven. Well,
um
he's driven by the person. I mean, I listen to Bill Simmons. I mean, that's more it's sports, but it's pop culture, and he goes all
yeah,
over the place too. You know, so it's
yeah.
like,
Yeah, that
yeah,
is true actually. Yeah, so
yeah.
even if it does have an umbrella of a particular topic, yeah, so when you invariably when you talk to someone for hours, like, you know, it
Well,
bleeds.
you gotta like the person you're talking to. I think ultimately that's what it is. Like Joe's popular because they like him, and Bill,
Yeah,
they like him, and whatever he wants to talk about, they're drawn into it. Like I didn't think I'd be into like sports betting, you know. I mean yeah, Jill Simmons talks a lot about like, you know, like advanced betting and stuff. I'm like, okay, I still don't bet, but you know, it's a thread that runs through everything. And so he talks
I see.
about parlays and like, you know, whatever, all these like things I've never even thought I would be interested in. And you know, Joe's got his thing too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He gives me an entry into, I would say, more politically conservative viewpoints in people. I generally don't I wouldn't be interacting, you know. So
You mean he himself or his guests?
yes, his guests,
Yes.
and to some degree himself too, honestly, but mostly his guests are ones that would normally not be folks I think I would run into on a daily basis.
I think though, overall, I think they are politically liberal, but maybe socially more conservative. Um,
Yeah,
overall, yeah.
does that make them conservative though? Wait,
Well,
like
but that's
yeah,
the thing. I think there's a lot of conflation going on in our
yeah,
society. You know, we
yeah,
conflate religion with, different things, and
No,
politics with
that's true.
different things.
That's true.
And now, like, everything is so politicized. Like, you can't have a conversation about, about something that's going on in the world without it being political, and
Oh
and
yeah.
also being affiliated with particular political camps. And
Well, I mean, just the fact that I even know Joe Rogan or mention it, I can't mention it to some friends because they immediately put me in a box. It's really weird. I mean, it's not like
I
Alex Jones or something. It's like, what? Wait, he's actually pretty on the middle in some ways, you know? He's
Yeah.
not. So yeah, even revealing your media and who you listen to is already you're already in with them. You can't even listen to different points of view because you're already like, it's
Right.
crazy.
And I think that's sad. I think that's a sad statement that we say about ourselves, that we can't even say, like, hey, like,
Listen to a Joe Rogan podcast, like what? What? Who are you? It's not Amy Goodman. It's not, NPR only. Yeah. I mean, I actually weirdly prided myself in LA because LA, people don't understand about Los Angeles is you're in your car a lot still.
yeah, yeah.
And you can't watch a video while you're driving. So you have to listen to radio. So radio is much more of a thing in LA. And I always wanted to listen to this talk show that I didn't realize until later was a conservative talk show, a
Huh.
conservative channel. It
Uh-huh.
had a whole lineup of people like Dennis Prager and oh God, I forgot the other people.
Or is it PragerU? Did it become PragerU or something?
Well, he franchised all these things, but I always
Okay, yeah.
appreciated Dennis. Dennis is like a conservative Jewish guy, very particular notions, but the way he articulated his thinking was so clear that even though I may have disagreed with certain things, I was like, wow, that really actually makes a lot of sense.
Right, right. And there's value in that, when
Totally.
a thought is well articulated, well thought through, and, logically it makes sense, even though you may disagree with
Mhm.
either the presupposition or the conclusion, or something in between, that
Totally.
you can appreciate the thought itself rather than just condemning, like throwing out the
Yeah.
bath with baby with the bathwater, or
Baby
whatever
with
the
the
expression
pathway.
is.
Well, I mean, this is very in line with my whole training with Coro. I mean,
Mhm.
Coro it was designed to ensure that diverse viewpoints
Right.
were listened to and trained you how to listen to them rather than you're listening through your lens, but like trying to be open. There's a lot of dimensions to listening. So it was just normal for me. So I was listening to a guy who, uh, didn't believe in affirmative action, uh, thought the world should be race blind. There were these like opinions that were not quite where I was aligned for me. At first my lens was, okay, this is a privileged white dude talking about how the world should be. But I said, let me pause a moment and think about this, right? I think he really won me over when and this was way before it was fashionable, when he condemned he called it the university industrial complex, where he thought like higher education was a complete
Yes.
not scam, but like why are we paying so much and putting people in debt forever in service of an education that's marginally beneficial for when you graduate, and unless you're going to be an academic, it doesn't necessarily work out for you. So we're in, and so I was like, wow, that is a great argument. It's rooted in fiscal conservancy, but I get it. I'm like, maybe it was condemning the liberal bias of colleges, but I totally lived that experience. Like, colleges are insanely expensive
It's
and
ridiculous. Yeah.
yeah. What is Princeton? I mean, not most people go to Princeton, but like, what is Penn now? It's like 75,000 tuition base, just tuition. Right?
I don't know. Yeah.
My dad, my siblings, my uncles, my aunts all went to UCLA. When my dad went to UCLA in like 1960 or 70, it was free. It was free for like 20 years after that.
Because it was a state college, state university.
Yes, but
yes.
It was a good college. It was like really good. It's now the
Yes.
#1 public school in the country, weirdly. I don't know how that happens, but yeah.
Yeah, back in the day, New York City university system, the CUNY system in New York
systems
City
were great.
was also very good, and
Yeah.
I think up until the 70s, it was free.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
NYU was not great, and now it's like a top university. It's probably how they do the algorithm in U.S. News and World Report. It's probably they own a lot of real estate and stuff like that. But
NYU is private though.
no, I know, but like
Oh,
how
okay.
colleges rise and fall, it's just weird. I don't
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah.
All I know is my entire college education tuition was $12,000 total for 4 years. Because based on the registration fees and whatnot that I had to
Oh,
pay.
all 4 years
Yeah.
total.
All the entire college education experience was
Yeah.
$12,000.
That's
You
not
know,
bad.
that's incredible, right?
Yeah,
That's affordable
that is
for a
affordable.
family. Yeah.
Yes.
Now it's $12,000 a year, which is still remarkably affordable, weirdly, but
Yeah.
now you're getting to a price point that's a little high. But back then, my dad paid nothing. He paid $100 for like just a registration fee for the year. And
Yeah.
that was affordable. That was a college education that was affordable. And now it's like, it's $80,000 just to pay tuition. Forget about room and board and all these other expenses. But I agreed with Dennis on that, and I became more open to sort of trying to understand folks who, on the surface, are very from different walks of life, different people, and see if they have a point, because that's what's important here, right? It's like, well, do people have a point? Not the entirety of the person. You shouldn't just listen to what one person believes on everything. You should listen to their points and decide which points you agree with, right? I mean,
exactly. And the thing is, just because you disagree on one point does not mean that the entire person is somehow now no longer valid. Like they no longer have anything redeeming to say just because you disagree on one particular thing. And it may be on an issue where it's, make or break for you. Like, like if this person I could not see eye to eye with this person on this particular point, I really can't see how we can get along, even if you get to that point. But it's a whole person. They have other thoughts and other opinions.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to dismiss someone because they eat at McDonald's or something, or believe in,
Taco Bell
food.
maybe, but not McDonald's.
Yeah.
No, just kidding.
But if someone literally thinks that, it has white supremacist views, let's say, I think all minorities shouldn't even be in this country and they're, subhuman or something like that. Then you're going to have complications. Yeah.
You're going to have complications, but I would almost guarantee that even a person like that, if you were able to get them into a room where you're having one-on-one conversation, real conversation, and find out where they're really coming from, where their philosophy and their thinking is coming from, then you at least get a better understanding that maybe this person is not a monster. Maybe he was brought up a certain way, or starts from a false notion or something, or maybe a past traumatic experience or something. Something is making this person believe this thing.
Well, the trick is to even be able to have a conversation with someone who has those beliefs, because they wouldn't have a conversation with you, right? And that's the whole trick of Koro. As much as we want to feel we're diverse, we're not thinking about the people who don't even dialogue or think that's an important mode of interaction, because if you can even have a conversation with them, that's the victory, in my opinion.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
The problem is even getting them to like acknowledge you or come and have like this, be on a podcast and talk long form about issues with you, because that person's already open, in my opinion.
Yes, that is true, because everyone who comes on are sort of self-selected. Because I mean, the fact that you've accepted my invitation says that you're open to a dialogue.
Well, I don't know how many invitations you throw out, JJ, but I'm totally
Oh, how many people I've invited?
Yeah.
Only one person said no, and it wasn't a no. It was more like, not now.
Oh yeah, okay.
And I think, so this is kind of interesting. So when I decided to do this, so I had been sort of mulling over this for quite a while.
Not the idea of hosting a podcast.
Yes.
I'd love to know that. Yeah, how did this happen?
So as I said in a previous conversation with you, that I've always loved and enjoyed long form conversation. I would much rather sit down with someone, and this goes back to when I was a child. I'd much rather sit down with a friend and just talk for hours as opposed to going to a party and having chit chats.
Sure.
I hate chit chats. And but anyway, so I think it sort of starts from there, and then I think where it sort of became more concrete is when this is, I don't know, 80s or 90s or something. I was watching a lot of PBS, and then I came across the Charlie Rose show.
Oh yeah, of course.
And
Long form interview.
yeah, long form interview. No,
Unfortunate Me Too pivot on his career, but okay.
sure, yes, all that aside,
Yeah.
whatever, but I still think, I mean, it's a sad turn, but
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't discount his work that he did.
Of course, sure.
And
sure.
yeah, and I noticed that the way he conducted his interview was very different from all the other talk shows that I've watched so far. How he really let his guests talk. He didn't have, his questions didn't seem like they had a particular agenda, that he really just wanted to get that person's point of view. I also noticed a difference in demeanor in the guests. Like, they were very relaxed and themselves. And I noticed this in particular when he interviewed celebrities, like, pop stars and, and actors, that, they weren't performing. Like, you could tell, like, you were actually talking to the person and not the performer.
Sure.
So it starts from there, and then so the love of this form, I think, really sort of solidified then. And then fast forward when I came across Joe Rogan's podcast, and so that just kind of also solidified.
I get it.
So that in terms of the art form, that's kind of like how it evolved. In terms of me putting myself out there as the podcast host, I think this kind of came across, I don't know how many years ago, but I noticed that, whether it's radio or TV, the louder voices were people on the extremes.
Yeah.
That people, reasonable, normal people with, from everyday background, from diverse backgrounds, diverse opinions, it's just kind of wasn't there. And so I always felt like, hey, there should be someone who's like normal, talking about politics, talking about religion, talking about, different issues, rather than these like pundits on either extreme side of things.
There's a reason though, right? I mean,
yes,
it's
I know.
marketing. Yeah,
yes,
it just gets ratings. It's like when you put the sensational like headline or image on a YouTube video and it just gets more views. It's unfortunately people are seduced into that space to promote themselves. And that's why Joe Rogan versus John Smith, who didn't do that. He doesn't exist, so.
I don't know if Joe Rogan, I think the fact that he was an established comedian and actor to begin with, I think that, too, that helped. But I don't see him as controversial. I think the certain segments of the public view him as controversial.
Well, I'm just saying he understands even intuitively the art of marketing himself, whether he knows it or not, because there's probably plenty of people who would love to have conversations. They just really don't, they don't want to be seen or heard. They don't know how to put it out, create a public persona, or all the things that you have to do. I mean, even yourself, you figure it out, how to get yourself on Stitcher. I'm not sure if you're on what other platforms you're on, but
I'm on most, yeah. But
but it's something we take for granted. Like, you are already in that space, and there's a lot of other people who I have conversations with that, they just don't have the wherewithal to do that. So that's what I mean. I don't even mean his political viewpoints.
Okay.
It's just more of,
yeah. So that's sort of where I think. but I always felt like there should be someone who does that, not necessarily me, because I'm not somebody who put, I don't put myself out there in the public. But I think I don't actually.
Oh, yeah. Well, you've got a nice, what do you got, like 10 interviews already? That's pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, I know, you know.
You're the 16th, so yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You're putting yourself out there, JJ.
I now I am, yes. But I mean, at some point, I mean, obviously at some point I decided, okay, I'm the one who's going to do this. But yeah, for a long time it was like, well, I wish somebody would do it. And at some point, but I think it was like when I started performing musically in public, that also kind of like got me more comfortable with putting myself out there.
Yeah.
But I think, through my music, I think it was sort of easier
Yeah.
because it's another layer that,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
But
cool.
conversation though, it's naked. It's very naked. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no,
Gotcha.
yeah. But anyway, so that's long story. So
Cool. Well, I'm
somehow, yeah.
glad you did it. And, I definitely saw you on social media putting yourself out there, I think, a lot more, right? In just terms of your thoughts and feelings, and the fact I didn't even know you had a podcast until you mentioned it to me on the Facebook post after my grandfather's
Yeah.
memorial. So this is cool. No, I'm excited. I'm excited for you. I think, yeah, I hope this really takes off and everything.
I hope so too, because right now I have only 11 subscribers on YouTube. So
Oh, that's the marketing piece, right?
I know that's the one, but I was surprised the other day. I wasn't paying attention for for a few days, and then all of a sudden it went to double digits. And like, when did that happen? So it's a nice surprise.
Rome
Yeah,
wasn't built in a day.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. But anyway, so what were we talking about? Yes, having conversations, and yeah. But anyway, so let's actually start talking about your family.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
yeah, so um, the reason why I did reach out to you was because your grandfather, your maternal grandfather, recently passed away, and you posted a lovely tribute on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
Thank you.
actually had to take screenshots because Facebook
Oh, the
stories.
story. Oh,
Yeah.
you weren't. Oh, you were doing it on your phone, right? You could just hold the screen and it'll pause it, right? You know that. Yeah, the
Oh,
story.
really? I
Oh,
didn't know
see,
that.
yeah, that's why I was like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And it's like, yeah, you just hold the screen and then it won't move. Yeah, so that's why I was like,
Because I didn't know that.
yeah.
Oh, thank you.
See, we're not young, we're not Gen Zers, we're not digital natives.
And you didn't
Yeah,
realize
and
that it only goes up for 24 hours.
yeah, I've never, honestly, I don't use, okay, the fact that we use Facebook already outs us as older, right? You know that they don't use
Yes.
Facebook as much,
Yeah.
right? Technically, I think it was on Instagram too, but I don't have a lot of followers on Instagram, so that wasn't gonna have the reach. So I kept it on Facebook and I was fine. I wasn't trying to get likes or anything. And I had all this media. I had all this media for all of my family because of my ancestry work, right? And my grandfather was particularly a person, like I said in the post, was really not a self-promoter. He was a quiet American. He was literally a guy who, when you talk to him, it'd be like a few grunts and words, and but he was an artist in his soul. I mean, he was just like a deep person and whatever. And I just wanted to, what I learned from my commitment, if you will, of my side passion of ancestry, is that, like if you want to live forever on the legacy of relatives, like they really live on through who remembers them.
Yes.
Ultimately, that is all it is, right? And a lot of times what we're trying to do this rat race for and everything is a legacy play. It's like to be remembered. I say that's Andrew's legacy too. He kind of wants to be remembered, but when you get down to the essence of it, it's that you have to be remembered by people who are actually alive at the time when you're not. And I thought, my grandfather also in his time he wasn't the flashy guy. He didn't try to run for office. He didn't like win any awards per se, but the life he did was a true artist's life. He was like an incredible, like just, I don't want to go, make this sort of a trite pop culture reference, but think of Mr. Miyagi from Karate Kid.
Yeah.
And maybe you have people who aren't old enough to remember that, but like, he literally is like, that's kind of what his life was. He was just kind of a recluse dude who had a lot to him, but wasn't looking to like showcase it. And he literally cut bonsais. He had a whole bonsai collection, those little Japanese plants. And he was a gardener. He drank a lot. He ate a lot. He smoked a lot, and he lived to 103 still. He gardened for stars in Hollywood, which was typically what Japanese Americans did. That's why, they lived in that area, because Hollywood was nearby. So like James Coburn, and there's all these other people. James Coburn is you may not know him, but he was in the Magnificent Seven, and he was a star in the 50s and 60s. And I guess the thing for me was like, my second home was with that family, with my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, grandmother, and I spent a lot of time in his backyard garden. And it was like where I found peace, and where I realized that, because my other side of the family is very tumultuous. They're like super academic, crazy, epic story, which I can talk to you about. And I mentioned before, I mean, we're talking about like, an MIT grad and Harvard grad or Harvard student from the 20s in New York, who lived in Brooklyn, was in this high-tech world of air conditioning back in the 20s, and did that, and was a president of a company in Manchuria, China, and then an interface with the president through a Senate bill that allowed reunification of U.S. citizens with foreign spouses, which later opened it up to all U.S. military GIs to bring back their Vietnam War or Korean war vets brides back to the U.S. That was like the spectacular side of my paternal side. My grandmother's, my mom's side is just like Mr. Miyagi, just
very quiet.
Plot, just did bonsais, like Mexican food, but incredible, like strong soul and spirit that more influenced me, in my opinion, than even that side. He was just he was like a Zen experience, and I thought his story needed to be told. So I put it out there in that medium. I wouldn't know what I was expecting, but I always really was struck by these incredible old photos, in particular the one from the internment camp or the concentration camp, which I found randomly. And I was like, what is this? And I go, this is Grandpa at Manzanar. I'm like, oh my God. I didn't even know he was at that camp. I thought he was at Tule Lake, but I found out later he was. And then I went to that spot that he was at in the photo, and I put them side by side. Yeah, it's in an earlier Facebook post. But his life was one of not self-promotion, not of going for glitz and glam. It was just like a person who was content with perfecting his particular thing, and he just did it over and over. And he lived to 103, almost 104. It's crazy. But there's just like two sides of my psyche which shaped me. One very much not looking for anything, just a very Japanese cultural thing where you just focus on one thing only. And then the other side was much more Western, which tended to be more in, excitement and like, ego kind of things, So anyway, stop there.
Yeah, your grandfather Saito, Grandpa Saito, his life, the way you describe it, is such a stark contrast to how the current generation is growing up, where the current generation is all about, and I include myself in our generation to some extent, because that was, we didn't grow up with the internet, but we do see the necessity, and we do engage in it, to some extent, varying extents.
But JJ, see, here's the thing you got to think about, right? Before we condemn,
And also, you're younger than me, so like I'm an older generation than you are, I think.
Well, I don't know if you are, but maybe you are. Okay, I don't
know.
know.
You're at least
in my late
10
40s.
years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in my 50s. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm younger than you. I mean, not really, but I am younger than you. All right. So this is what I always think about in Ancestry, and it's such a it's such a helpful sort of thing to think about what you just talked about, like that this generation is more into the internet, they have that. But the internet of their generation was the telephone. Because like what I found out was like my grandparents, and my dad's generation, for me, the internet was television. They kind of grew up in that, but you had these media modes that developed through technology that changed and was not native to the youth of the previous generation. So I would, when I was doing the memorial, when I was putting it together, it was so complicated because I literally was taught, I had octogenarians and people in their 80s and 90s, and then people in their 20s who had to attend. But I couldn't figure out how to invite people, right? So my Aunt Bobby, who was in the 80s, needed a phone call and a physical letter mailed, okay? Then there's people our generation who are fine with an email or Facebook. You can call too, I guess, right? But it's usually, like some of them called me. They just called me straight up. The generation now would you can't call them. you don't call. You chat. You don't even email, and you don't Facebook. You like send it on Instagram maybe, or you chat. Maybe it's Telegram, maybe it's TikTok, maybe it's I don't know, whatever, right? And they would you can't send a letter. You don't do a phone call. And so it was like an entire spectrum of sensibility around communication that I had to navigate. This is a quick funny story. And I'll let you get back to the topic.
I think you know what? I think dissecting what you just said and analyzing that would also be just an interesting, sort of.
We'll bookmark that. It was so fascinating. But like my Aunt Judy, okay, she's 80 something. She visited me in New York one time, and I took her around. She appreciated it. But she's on email, which is hip for her age. I think 80-year-olds are on email. But she emailed me, "Hey Eddie, can you send me your mailing address?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, sure, Aunt Judy. Why?" It's like, because I want to send you a thank you letter. I'm like, but you just thanked me. You know what I mean? For them, it's not complete unless a letter is sent. An email thanking you is not adequate, right? Isn't that great? So I was like, but you just thanked me. I don't understand. Oh, you want to
email is not courtesy, it is utility. Yeah. So but if you want to extend courtesy, it has to
young people aren't going to physically send you a thank you letter unless it's like a wedding or something, maybe something super high, like formal. But that's just how it is. And for us, call waiting was a huge technological advancement. Remember the days where it was rotary and you wanted to avoid having a phone number with a 9 on it because it's the longest transition.
I think zero is.
Well, 02, but that's why the area codes for New York and LA were 212, 213, right? They got it. They got the first one. So it's one quick, right? You don't think about it. And if you're on the phone back then, it's the 80s, let's say, you can't get any calls. Like it would be a busy line if someone calls, and you only had one phone usually, maybe two if you're rich, right? Yeah. You had one phone. And so when call waiting came in, where you can hear a click, if someone's trying to call in, you can click through them. It was like, wow, this is amazing. It's like, that was technological innovation. And then when the rotary became a touch phone, that was even super awesome, right? Yeah. And it's, that's technology. That's like the internet for our generation. There's a reason it's called calling someone, because you used to have to do calls. You physically went to someone's house and you had cookies and tea with them.
You call on them.
My innovation to my grandparents were that you could phone call them now, that's became the call. Right. Email, it's still a reference to mail, right? Even though it's, so we have these anachronistic references to, the horseless carriage, the incandescent light candle, right? So it's just how technology progresses, and it's going to keep happening.
And those are all valid points. I hope I wasn't condemning or shitting on today's generation. I was just commenting on the difference.
That's true. True.
I mean, yes, these technologies, they change the way in which they change the way we communicate, but it also does like so much of our lives are now in the public domain. That wasn't that didn't exist before, you know.
That's
Like,
for sure true.
yeah, because before the internet, you wouldn't put an ad out on the local newspaper saying, "Hey, I'm doing this." I mean, unless you were a socialite or something, you know.
Eating a sandwich now at Chipotle or whatever. Yeah, you don't. No, it was very hard to push out information. You know,
Yeah.
I think I don't even know what the early. I mean, I remember Friendster. That was like one of the first
Yes.
early things, the early version of Facebook's, which was very clunky, didn't kind of always work. And then obviously Twitter came out, which pushed out things. And you know, there's a moment of MySpace, and there's all these other platforms.
I think MySpace still exists.
Yeah, but it was number one for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and then it kind of dropped back, and Facebook kind of came back.
Yeah.
But you know, I don't even. What is it now? I don't even. You know, there was that information which Snapchat. Is that what it's called? Snapchat.
TikTok and
Innovated.
Snapchat, I think.
Well, Snapchat was the no trail thing, right? You will have no documentation of what your social media was. It'll expire, right? And that was a priority.
Is that
Yeah.
why it was so popular? Okay.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, and
actually never got on Snapchat.
Well, because we're a certain generation.
Yeah.
And then it became more the sort of the augmented reality stuff with the glasses and the hats and the faces. Snapchat became more known for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, all these platforms, you know, I think it's kind of like songs, you know, like artists, like people of a generation adopt certain ones and they kind of stick with them, you know, like 80s or something, at least for me. I'm not sure if you were more like ABBA or Bee Gees or Michael Jackson or
70s.
Okay, yeah.
70s singer-songwriter, yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was a little before my time. So I was like 80s. I was like, you know, around the Cyndi Lauper, early Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
You know, I still have a nostalgia for that. And when I think of 70s, I think tacky. I think, you know, like I changed my mind on it later, but like with all these bell bottoms and long hair, I was much more of a clean cut 80s, you know, person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the nostalgia was definitely in the 60s. I love the 60s of my dad's music with like Richie Valens. Well, I say Richie Valens because he went to high school with Richie Valens, but you know, Elvis and Beatles. Well, Beatles might be a little later, but you know, the oldies, what have been known as oldies back then. So it's the same with technology platforms. I think people grew up with Facebook, they grew up with Snapchat, they grew up with Twitter, they grew up communicating in this way, and I can't keep track of it anymore. I don't know.
Yeah, it's too many. I mean, you might say like people are not using Facebook anymore, but I mean, globally though, it's still growing. It is the largest social media platform in terms of subscribers.
But see, that's the thing. You also got to think about like, okay, so like in China they use like WeChat, in Japan they use Line, Japan and Thailand, and in America they use WhatsApp, like all these like messaging platforms or whatever, and they change too. But yeah, you got to think about who you're communicating with. So my two brothers live in Japan. I use Line, but if I'm going to communicate in Mexico with people, no one uses Line. They all use WhatsApp, right? Yeah. And if I'm in another country, they use different things, you know? And so it's just...
Yeah, I know.
We need one platform to rule them all. We need one. Yeah.
That's never going to happen. Yeah. I use KakaoTalk, which is I think it's a Korean company. So with my family, yeah. So I use KakaoTalk with my family, but yeah.
That's so funny.
But that's it. Yeah. It's just
Oh, you know what's funny? Just real fast.
Yeah.
I said, and I don't know if you could record at this point, but I'm like, I have this weird like accidental witness to Asian American things.
Yes. Let's talk about that. Yes.
Well, I was going to say it because you mentioned a Korean thing, right? Because so I played in different basketball groups other than Andrew Yang's, you know, in New York. And one of them was this one I ran with Ben Sun and Peter Chen, who you may not, I don't know if you know them, but they started Asian Avenue, which was the first, it's when there was a war for the sort of Asian dating scene stuff, right?
Okay.
So like Jeff Yang, who's Tao Jones, he's pretty prominent. His son is Hudson Yang, the guy from Fresh Off the Boat, right? His son is the star of that show.
Okay.
He graduated Harvard. He had this great magazine called A magazine, which is Asian. Yeah. And he wanted to put his shit online in the 2000s, and it started this Asian online thing. But there was also another platform called Click to Asia. and there was another one called Asian Avenue, which is run by Peter and Ben. Asian Avenue ended up winning that war, and they're VCs now, and they do like great stuff. But I play basketball with them, right? I play basketball with them regularly at Stuyvesant High School. A friend of that group is a guy named Bom Kim. I don't know if you've heard of him. So Bom, I used to guard him, but he went to Harvard as undergrad. I think he went to high school here. I'm not sure, but then was at Harvard Business School and quit to say, because I want to start Groupon in Korea. And so he left US, he went to Korea and started Groupon, which became Coupang, which is the Amazon of Korea. So now he's like a multi-billionaire.
Really?
Yeah, he's the Jeff Bezos of Korea. It's so weird. And I can't help but think I was like boxing him out in the low post or in a pickup basketball game at Stuyvesant High School for years. Anyway, that's a weird factoid that just keeps coming up for me.
So I'm curious. So the way the different guys play basketball, like their style, their I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah, the way they play. Their game, yes. Does that tell you anything about the person?
No. No, really. Like you can have like, I don't know what that would be. Like I'm trying to think of a clear person type. Let's say you have Jeff Bezos, I guess. I don't know. I can't imagine playing basketball with Jeff Bezos. Like
for example, so let me, I studied psychology in college. And so like, that's where I always sort of fall back to. It's like, I wonder like how, what makes a person tick, that sort of thing, internal mechanisms and all that.
Sure.
And personality. So to clarify my question, so let's say, like somebody who takes risks in the way they play basketball, do they also take risks in life? Kind of thing.
Oh.
Is there some correlation in terms of like, because you've been playing with them a long time, and so you kind of got to know them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel I want to dissect Andrew's game, but Andrew liked basketball because he just liked basketball, but that wasn't his skill set. Let's just be honest. Like I grew up my entire life playing basketball from the Asian leagues, like the ones that Jeremy Lin played in, right? It's a brutal competitive thing on the West Coast. It's not like that in the East Coast as much. Except in Chinatown, there's some Chinese leagues that are pretty competitive. But Andrew didn't grow up that way. I mean, didn't grow up in upstate New York, like in the middle of, pretty rural country for a while.
Yeah, I think so.
For him, basketball was more of like a cool, fun activity. I don't think he was trying to, I think he would like to have like been really like dominant or whatever, but for him, it was social and it was cool, and his game was, he was a shooter. He played within the flow of the game. He wasn't like, super innovative or creative or, whatever in the game, because it's not his skill set. It's not really what he did. I didn't know that until I, worked with him. Right. I mean, he's an incredible operations guy. He's an incredibly, almost maniacally hard worker, and very structured thinker. You don't see that on the basketball court. That's not where his intelligence per se reaches its apex. I mean, he's a solid player. It's just not Michael Jordan or whatever, it's just not like that, even though he's kind of a Michael Jordan in the professional political world, in my opinion. So
I was just curious if there was any sort of, I don't know, correlation or something.
Well, I think like persistence and that stuff plays out, like, and some people do something like they bring their ego, like it's almost like birth order. You're used to being the oldest child and you can't. They bring that to the game. So
I'm a huge birth order person.
Yeah. So a lot of his friends who leaned more private sector finance, right? They were definitely like weekend warrior types, right? And so like for me, basketball at that point was more of exercise and being creative, not about winning, say, right?
Yeah.
And it became like just about winning, and sometimes it was not fun. I was like, dude, chill out, man, right? I was like,
But you came from the competitive West Coast.
No, but basketball out West is an intergenerational like like honor thing. I don't even know how to explain it. Like
Ah,
you don't have that anywhere else.
interesting.
It's okay. So this is a quick history on the Asian basketball leagues, which is technically the Japanese basketball leagues, right?
Uh-huh.
So after World War II, um, uh, during World War II in the camps, the barracks had inter-barrack competitions that they did. It was a lot of baseball back then, but it could
Mhm.
have been volleyball, maybe some basketball. I don't know. Basketball's hard to do in the dirt, in the desert, right? But baseball
Yeah.
is like perfect, right? A lot of land, arid. And they took that after the camps got disassembled and they maintained it. So they tended to congregate, Japanese who left the camp stayed on the West Coast mostly. And then they formed, they were in these cities like LA and San Jose and San Francisco and Seattle. But the epicenter really was like California. It was like San Jose and Sacramento and Los Angeles, right? And then within Los Angeles, because you can't commute on weekends to San Francisco, there were the neighborhoods, right? So my neighborhood was West Los Angeles. That was my team. But then there's Venice, Gardena, Pasadena, West Covina, Orange County, as a lump. And then you play each other in this very significant schedule. Basically, it's the season. You play almost every single weekend and you practice every Friday for a game on Sunday. And then there are tournaments that you travel to.
Wow.
Every like from late spring to summer, or late spring especially, springtime. The tournament sort of system starts setting up. So each neighborhood runs its own 3-day tournament, or 2-day tournament. Sunday and a Saturday. You play 2 games on Saturday and 1 on Sunday. And people travel from, we have the San Jose Ninjas come down to LA. We have Orange County and San Diego and Sacramento come down for the big tournaments, like the Tigers tournament was a big one. And then we travel up there and it becomes this exchange where it's basically almost more for the parents because they get an excuse to go travel up, and they hang out at a hotel and then they socialize and their kids play basketball. So it gives them a reason. It's actually as much for the parents as it is for the kids. And
So these are youth leagues?
Yes.
Okay.
They start down here from kindergarten where you play in a
Wow.
peewee basket. And I played baseball. The baseball system dismantled because there's not as much interest in baseball and it's a lot harder to execute because you need more people, you need equipment. Basketball is really simple, right?
Yeah.
So I played from kindergarten to high school, essentially. There's a drop off in high school because a lot of the kids like play high school. They play in their high school. They don't play in the league because they overlap. You can't play games with both teams. And sometimes you have to sign a waiver by the high school that you're not playing in other leagues. So it's complicated. But up until early high school, it's like from middle school, like I was like from late elementary to high school, it is it. I mean, it is serious like stuff, I mean, the Asian female leagues actually is a feeder for the NCAA. I mean, I don't know if you know, but Asian women do exceptionally well. Oh, Lindsay Yamasaki was a Stanford grad and was the #1 player in the country. Natalie Nakase, who played at UCLA, is now working as an assistant coach for the Clippers. But there's a lot of these people, particularly women, who were in the Asian leagues, got scholarships to schools like Stanford and UCLA. And then, a lot of times they go, okay, I'm going to now actually do some traditional work, but some continue on. And they're coaches, they're, at college level, one at the pro that I know of. It's a serious thing that the men are different. It's just too competitive. I think rarely do they rise, save Jeremy Lin. Jeremy Lin is like one of the only people. There was Rex Walters. You don't know him. He was Hapa. He was half Japanese, white. He played at Kansas and then he played for a while in the NBA.
Hapa, is that a term for half Japanese, half white?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's a Hawaiian term, I believe, called Hapa Haole, which means half white. But Hapa is generally the term Japanese use to describe someone who's of mixed Japanese ancestry. So like Naomi Osaka would be Hapa. But that's a Japanese American reference to it. In Japan, they call you double. I forget what it is because it's complicated. Yeah, Japan has a different set of nomenclature than Americans do for mixed Japanese.
I'm sure Koreans have some term too, but I don't know it.
I never. That's true. I don't know what that is either. I mean, there are a lot of like incredibly prominent half Korean folks like. don't know, Johnny Morton's half Japanese. There's athletes that are like
Yeah.
probably lesser known.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, but yeah, no, it's an institutional term now, and quite frankly, fifth, sixth generation Japanese kids who are the generation after me are mostly Hapa. They're
Mm.
mostly mixed. It's like 70 to 80% intermarriage rates are
Mm-hmm.
happen. So the Japanese American community as a pure genetic line is pretty much not there anymore.
Hmm.
It's Japanese mixed with something else.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually in my formative years, I grew up in Washington Heights, so it's,
Hmm. Wow.
Hispanic, Black,
Yeah.
a lot of Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, and so I mean, I did go to a Korean church, and so I saw Korean people only like on the weekends, only on Sundays, and but the neighborhood, you know, um what was the point I was gonna make? Oh yes. Okay. So that's how I grew up. Now my sister's kids, my nephews and nieces, in some ways they're more Korean than I am, even though they're, generation later, because
Hmm.
they grew up in neighborhoods where there were a lot more Koreans.
Hmm.
And
In New
so they
York.
um well, New York and New Jersey. Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah,
And
yeah. A lot of Koreans in Jersey, Fort Lee, Palisades Park,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
Palisade Park, Fort Lee, and actually one of my sisters, they went back to Korea and lived there for like 6 years. And yeah, so the
Oh.
kids partly grew up there too. I mean, they did go to international school, but still they were surrounded by Koreans.
I grew up. Well, my first girlfriend was Korean, a
Oh yeah.
PK. All right. Also,
Uh
pastor's
P-
kid.
yeah, okay. Yeah,
Okay.
I saw that in your bio. I'm like, PK, huh? I wonder if he means pastor's kid
But I,
because
I
yeah.
thought Korean folks know what that means
Yeah.
implicitly because
Yeah,
there's a
yeah.
heavy amount of pastor, Christian Koreans in America.
Yes.
So I happened, my first girlfriend in LA was that. And it was, the part of LA I grew up in was mostly Japanese, if it was Asian. But the Korean and Chinese communities were starting to move in. And she was one of the early folks. Her family left Korea and then moved to Minnesota, then to Texas, and then started a congregation in a swap mall. I don't even know if that is like an old rundown mall in Koreatown in
Oh
LA.
yeah.
So I got to spend a lot of time there. Now I didn't join the Korean service; I joined the English service, right? Sometimes, but
Mm-hmm.
I was attending a Buddhist church in LA at the same time, which was across the street from our house in LA, right? Weird, it's just weird. But so I really got my first education in like Asianness outside of Japanese through her. Just
Mm-hmm.
the food we ate, the little black beans, like Koreans share food in a common low table.
Yes.
Like these metal spoons. Like
Yes.
it's like we don't do that. Metal chopsticks. It's
Yeah.
hard to handle, real thin. Right.
I know.
Um,
I hate those.
there's always going to be the
and
smell of kimchi, right? Like the
and the
red
bowls are
pepper.
metal too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like Japanese don't use metal
Yeah.
almost ever. Plastic more, right?
Yeah.
And so it was like so interesting. It's like, well, there's rice. It's the same, and then I love this meat shit. And I was like, I'm sorry, like it's so good. We didn't, you don't barbecue as a regular thing you eat in a Korean household. You have like pickled stuff or
Yeah.
beans or like whatever, kimchi for sure. And then the smell of the red pepper, oh man, it's strong because you got to store it somewhere, right? And it's
Yeah.
just always around. Japanese don't have that. It's like, woo, woo. But and my best friend in high school was Korean, and it was funny. I didn't think about the interethnic Asianness in LA until more of those moments. But like honestly, racial dynamics, I think in California are very different than New York.
Yes.
They're much more stratified white black here than in California, which is a majority minority state. And in particular, though we know people are certain races and ethnicities, most of my friends and colleagues in LA are Mexican, like not Latino, Mexican, right?
Yeah.
And we just know, hey, you're Japanese, you're Mexican, you're black, you're whatever. It's just like you just say it as like it's a name tag. It's no big deal. But here,
Right.
there's a heavier thing to it. It's like people avoid it, like don't even want to mention it. And it's so interesting for me when I moved here that's in play.
That's interesting. I don't know if I ever noticed that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think also New York culture is we don't well, West Coast, you're much more friendly. And I think so in
Laid
general.
back. We're laid back.
Laid
Yeah.
back, more friendly, and also I think I mean people out there socialize differently. Over here, I think people play much closer to the vest. Um,
Well, there's more. There's more. This is how I've understood it. In my 20 plus years being, or 20 years in New York.
yeah,
The factor that's different on the East Coast, in particular New York's, let's say, right? There's a definite aspect of classism that is a part of a calculation of a person's head here, like what school you went to, in a way that isn't in play in California. We're very Western in that way. We don't care what school you went to, or like you didn't go to like Dalton or Choate, or you didn't go to
yeah.
a specialized high school, or you didn't go to an Ivy League school, or you didn't, we don't have that at all. There's none of that.
Do you mean amongst Asians or amongst New
Everybody,
Yorkers?
everybody,
Yeah, but
everybody.
there is definitely that
Yeah.
kind of I guess pedigree, if you
Yes,
will.
pedigree is not a thing in
Yeah,
California in the way that it is here. I mean, not to say that there isn't some of that.
yeah.
It's just more of like, are you fit, healthy, attractive? I mean, what kind of car do you drive, maybe? Is like, maybe. Even neighborhoods are kind of not relevant. It's like, if you're from Bel Air, it's kind of douchey. It doesn't really matter. It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, they don't care. And here, it's really particular. Yes, I went to St. Anne's, and then I was at this. It's like tradition and history is way more relevant on the East Coast than on the West Coast, and this is very much a very Western U.S. thing.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And I think maybe because New York is an older city than LA or any other California cities. Um I don't
Yeah,
know. There is also like there is old money here too still, I think.
yeah,
And sort of the European tradition, history, and although there isn't really an aristocracy, not necessarily, but there is some of that.
well, you have Harvard, Yale, Cornell clubs. You have
Sure.
all these things. You have class reunions every 5 years. I mean, these are Ivy Leagues, and
Yeah.
then you have there's a pretty big consciousness of prep school or even public school stuff. I went to Hunter. I went to Stuyt. It's not. No one's proud that they went to like Crossroads. Well, I don't say, or like the top, like El Camino Real or Taft. They don't care. They don't care. Who cares? Like, yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know.
I don't know why that is in New York. Yeah, but yeah, that does count for a lot. I never cared for it. I couldn't care less.
Right, but
Um,
I mean, I think you just feel it. I couldn't understand it at first, and now I'm on
yeah.
the other side of it. I get it. I mean, it went more than like, why do these people wear black socks all the time? Like that was like a weird thing. New Yorkers default to these black socks thing. Then West Coast, we never wear that. You never wear
Yeah.
black. You wear white socks for anything. And
Black socks and just black clothing in general. Yeah.
yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
Asian too. So it's hard to partition it. Asians tend to lean black because of the complexion. It just works better design wise. But like black socks were like an identifier for me in the West Coast before I moved here, that this is not a West Coast person, like
Oh,
Jeff Yang or whatever. Yeah, it's like they were in black socks in the summer. What are you doing? Like, it's just different, It's
yeah.
something a Californian would understand, because, you say you're laid back. We say you're high strung,
Yes. Yes.
right? It's a different way we see each other, and it's like, why are you set off so easily on stuff, and it's like so uptight? Just chill, just relax,
Yeah.
right? That's how we would see it.
I don't know if uptight is quite the word, but there's definitely a sense of urgency to everything. And
Sure.
sort of hyperness to
Well, that's New
everything.
York for sure. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
see. Yeah, if you're looking at other parts of the East Coast, yes. But also, like if you go south, I mean, even on the East Coast, if you go south, it changes the culture and the
it's
demeanor
true.
of people
No,
changes.
that's true. That is
Um,
true. That is true.
yeah, and that's I think that's the one thing. I don't know how cognizant people are in the US, like, everyday people, that the US is not a singular country
Of
culturally.
course not. Of course not.
It's
Yeah.
not. And I've done a fair amount of road trips, and actually, so after I left my corporate job, I spent like 3 months well, 2 months overseas,
Mm.
just kind of like traveling around.
Oh,
And
cool.
then I did cross country across the US. And I mean, I knew it
Wow.
even before then, but it was so apparent then that US is a collection of cultures and collection of
Well,
peoples.
the U.S. is a collection of states that decided in order to protest unfair taxes to
Yes.
become a union. I mean,
Yes.
we're corporations that decided to become a country, essentially, right? So,
Exactly. And that's
yeah,
why it's the United States of
yeah.
America, not America, period. Yeah.
Yeah, with these different parts of it, right? Yeah, I mean, I did a road trip too, by the way. After
Yeah.
my Coro year, it was like 2.5 months on a car driving
Yeah.
around the U.S., 42 states and three Canadian provinces.
Nice.
Yeah, I'd like to compare notes, but yeah, it was, the surface was the people and the terrain changed, but then the food, but and the one thing back then that united America was there's two things: wrestling and Arizona iced tea. That was what I take away. Everywhere had wrestling conversations, like WWF back then, and everywhere had Arizona iced tea. If I were doing it again today, I would definitely explore barbecue more as an institution of America.
Yeah.
But yeah, I went to like all these baseball stadiums. I went to SummerSlam in Madison Square Garden. I don't know why I did that. It's my roommate. We went together. But on these long drive stretches, like 18 hours from
Yeah.
Minneapolis to Black Hills for the Mount Rushmore, there's nothing. It's flat, and at the rest stops, the only consistent thing is, oh, they got Arizona iced tea. So I sugared up. I probably almost developed diabetes on that trip, but I mean, it's changed now. I'm sure there are other options, but that was
Yeah.
America for me, and it was pretty amazing. And my stop in Alabama, Birmingham or is it Birmingham or is it Mississippi? No, it's Jackson, Mississippi.
Okay.
Wow, that's when I realized America is a white and black country.
It is. Yeah.
And it was clear how it was racially divided because every worker at this place that we were eating at was black and every customer was white. Never in anywhere I've been in California was that the dynamic. You might lean more this way or that way, but it was like
Yeah.
so stark. And then when in another place, same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Now that's the deep South. It's not all of America, but it kind of followed a similar pattern. And that's, then I understood, wow, my America in LA is just very different than everything in between New York and LA.
Yeah. And so, so I think if you're aware of that, then you kind of also understand how, culturally it's different and how politically it's different and why people would lean one way or another and
Sure.
or say, certain things and behave certain ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's you know I mean, no country is sort of
Homogenous.
uniform or homogenous like all
Japan's
the way
pretty
through.
close, but yeah, I
Japan is very close
get
because culturally it sort of demands that, right? Conformity.
forced assimilation and conformity. Yeah, and
Yes.
no immigration, no legitimate immigration. I mean, icons of Japan are actually Chinese. Like the inventor of instant ramen, Momofuku Ando, is a Taiwanese man.
Yeah.
The number one Japanese baseball player of all time, Sadaharu Oh, is Chinese, I think. I think he's Chinese, might be Korean. But they have to change their name to fit in, but they're
Yeah.
actually
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that it's just an interesting side note. So after Deutsche Bank, I went to work for a Japanese bank, and at one point, the HR department changed their system, and so the names that started appearing in the corporate directory sort of reverted back to like the official legal names as opposed to their preferred names. Now, there was one employee in particular. She had a Japanese name, but she's ethnically Korean, so she grew up in Japan.
oh,
But like you said, right?
dangerous. Yeah,
Right, exactly. So she had to,
dangerous.
her family had to, because that's non-ethnic Japanese in Japan are treated as like second-class citizens.
There's many
And
YouTube videos about this. Yeah.
yeah. And
Mhm.
so, and especially Koreans, because they, during the occupation, they were, forced over and all that. And so there are generations of
Yep.
Korean Japanese. Anyway, so she's one of them.
Yeah.
She came to work for this Japanese bank. And
Were
so
you in
her,
Tokyo, by the way? Where were
no,
you?
no, 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 they never sent me to Tokyo. No, in New
Oh,
York.
you worked for them, but you weren't physically there. Okay.
Right,
Okay.
right. Yeah, yeah. I was working for their New York branch.
Okay.
Um, and so her legal Korean name started appearing in the corporate directory. So basically outing her. Now, because this is a, American branch, there wasn't a big, huge,
Yeah.
like, yeah. But it was an issue with her. And so people who didn't know her heritage, especially the Japanese people, they were like, oh, they were surprised
Yeah.
because she spoke Japanese. She had a
Oh, that'll
Japanese.
change their total interaction with her. Are you kidding?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Now, the thing is, the people who ran the HR department, they were not Japanese, because it's the American branch. And so they had no idea, like, why is this such a big deal? Like, because
Oh,
they
jeez.
don't know.
This is like when they launched the Chevy Nova in Mexico. And of course, the car, and Nova means no go in Spanish.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
have a
yeah,
car
that's
named
right.
No Go. No Go. I'm going to buy a car named No Go. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and what I also find is not all Japanese understand or are taught the history either. So like I was having a conversation with a Japanese colleague who's part of the home staff. So they're here for several years and then they go back.
Yeah.
And I was talking to one of them, and I was telling them how my parents learned Japanese when they went to school,
Mm-hmm.
and they were like, oh, but you're not Japanese. Yeah, I'm Korean, but my parents had to learn Japanese in school. Like, why is that? Because of the occupation. What is that? Like, they don't know.
Well, I
They,
mean, look,
yeah.
there's a spectrum of ignorance of which Japanese people. This is a Japanese person asking you this, is
Yes.
it? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Japanese are, they're comfort women deniers, right? And all that
Yeah.
whole thing,
Yeah.
right? All
Yeah.
the things that happen. But in America, it's even worse. They,
Oh,
after this
yes.
conversation, they'll go like, "So, what part of China are you from?" It'll just be one amorphous big thing, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a museum in Tokyo that is the formal Japanese position on the history of Japan, and the whole like Nanking, not Korea specifically, but China is like thing. It says like, and then this thing happened, and then just move on. It's like it's not even acknowledged. It's acknowledged that was a big thing, but it's not like a big thing,
Yeah.
And that's the. I mean, that's something Japan is dealing with right now. But they're very comfortable culturally with redacting or sanitizing a particular story, as all countries are, right? I
As
mean,
all
America
countries
does.
are. America
Yeah,
too, definitely.
yeah.
And
Talk
depending
about
on,
Panama Canal and start a civil war with Colombia to create the Panama Canal. We don't want to talk about that. It's like,
yeah.
we're not that type of person. We're not that type of country. So anyway.
Well, even stuff that happens in the US, like, you mentioned the internment camps. Like, how
Mhm.
many people in the US actually are aware of internment camps? I mean, I think most people, they're aware of the Holocaust.
Well,
And,
we like to call it concentration camps, actually. That's actually the formal position of the Japanese community, because internment, it's funny. Like there's been a lot of attempts to educate and put it in formal textbooks, and I think they've done that. I mean, it was an exhibit in the Museum of American History and the Smithsonian in DC. It was an entire
okay.
section. So
Wow.
I think it's known now. I don't think, but they're not putting it in the same space as the Nazi concentration camps.
Sure,
Of course. Yeah.
because it wasn't like that. Yeah.
There wasn't mass executions and cremations, but from the standpoint of the community, the indignities were similar in
Sure.
the loss of property. You had to move and only had 2 suitcases. You lived in a horse barrack with many families in very freezing cold places. It was certainly more humane than than Auschwitz and Dachau, but it doesn't undermine the fact that, see, the Nazis had no predisposition or statement on humanity. they were actually formally against anyone who wasn't Aryan. But America was supposed to be above that, right? We like poo-pooed or whatever, like, on what happened there and the racism of Nazi Germany, but yet we were doing it simultaneously in the country. So that's what is even more difficult to kind of reconcile.
Yeah, and I think that is the interesting, that is a sort of a almost singularly interesting thing, is while they were condemning the concentration camps in Germany and in Europe, they were doing the same here.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it wasn't publicly acknowledged at that time, right?
Well, the rhetoric was, and I have a particular take on it from people I've talked to. The rhetoric was this. Okay, so look, some would argue that Pearl Harbor was allowed to happen because Roosevelt really wanted to enter the war. And it makes a lot of sense in that the first place the efforts were focused on were Europe, right? Most of the efforts were Europe. And I get it. Like, if Roosevelt needs to stop what's going on in Europe from happening and spreading, he needs the Congress to agree to it. He needs something to happen that instigates it. And Pearl Harbor happened, right? So we'll just like put a stake in that. Okay. Secondly, I don't want to get into conspiracy theories. Some people argue that's actually true or not. Second thing is, well, if you have that threat from the Japanese, there's a lot of Japanese in Hawaii and the West Coast. They need to be sequestered. This is kind of like the Muslim situation after 9/11, right? Yeah. And they were saying we should like put them all in Guantanamo or whatever. But they decided to sort of do that within a certain line, a western line of the United States. So I actually had some family in Spokane, Washington, who were not required to be in the camps. So I have family who were not in the camps during World War II.
Interesting.
Yeah, they were sponsored by a Christian family in Spokane and allowed to work. And it was like, at first you go, that's so great. But my great grandfather literally has said this, because he visited his brother in a camp during the war and came out and he goes, sometimes I wish I were in a camp, because do you understand how hard it is to live out there while you're selling vegetables to families whose children are being killed by Japanese people? It's like the hate and the racism that went on during the war was almost like better to be in the camp.
Because you didn't have to face the public if you were in those camps.
Well, you also got 3 squares a day. You got 3 meals. Didn't have to worry about anything. I mean, they had to make a living.
Did they have to hide the fact that they were Japanese, or change their names, or pretend that they were
after the war? During the war, I don't know. Actually, no, that's a good question. Did they pose as Chinese people? It wouldn't have been Koreans then. So did they pose as Chinese? I know my aunt did pose as a Chinese for a while, because she moved after the camp dismantled to New York City. She lived in Inwood and worked at a gift shop in Rockefeller Center. But I think for a stretch there, she couldn't reveal that she was Japanese. When the 80s came around, she definitely was fine with being Japanese, because all the Japanese, they bought Rockefeller Center and all these tourism, and Japan was like a rich country. But yeah, for a while there, it was really hard. Here's the harder part. My dad was born, he's an immigrant actually. His parents his mother is an American citizen from birth. But they went to Japan in 1932 for my grandpa's job. And my dad was raised in Tokyo and then in Daibian, Manchuria. And he didn't come to the US until he was 12. So he spoke no English, was kind of grew up Japanese. When he came to the US, they stayed in Spokane with the great grandmother and some family. And he got beat up by his cousins for being disloyal, like by his own family.
Wow.
They say, you traitor, what the hell is wrong with you? And he's like, what the hell? I went with my family on a business trip to Japan. They didn't come back in the 30s. And it was like crazy. So he was getting hate. Not only was he having the immigrant experience and not speaking English and having to be like 3 grades younger and everything he came to the US after World War II as a Japanese man, a boy. And he got bullied by his cousins. Yeah. His own family. It's crazy, It's just
wow.
It's heartbreaking. So
I'm sure, the discrimination and the hardship that they experience, here in the US, I don't know. I guess I'm making excuses. You know, maybe like that sort of disposition them to be sort of harsh, you know, harshly judgmental on their own people. I don't know. Because there is sometimes
Are you talking, who are you talking about? My
talking
own
about your
family?
father's cousins. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is something, I didn't put this in the Word document, I sent to you, but so prior to maybe 8 years ago, I had no interactions with my family. I didn't even know them. I didn't know they
Really?
existed. That org chart, didn't know it existed. I just, because my father had such a difficult time with his relatives, he
Ah,
sequestered us from them our entire upbringing. I didn't know them. So when I reconnected, when I was helping my grandmother move, she was actually being evicted from her home
uh-huh.
uh, in her late ages, and I was helping her move, and I found this binder, and I was like, "What is this?" It's like a thick binder with all these pictures and bios. It's like photocopy, and she goes, "Oh, that's your dad's family, like, which is mine, not hers, but mine." I'm like, "What the hell?" So it was basically a binder of like well organized with this org chart of every single person who's ever come to the US from my father's mother's family, the Hisayasus. And everybody, and she had 10 brothers and sisters, all of whom had 8 children or whatever. And it was this like massive family. And I never had any interactions with them because my dad says I don't interact with the Hisayasus. And so my effort and my ancestry want was to reconnect with them, to add on to these resources and not them be names, but be actual relationships I had. And so that's what I've been doing about a decade now.
Oh,
And why I have all
wow.
those pictures. That's why I have these pictures. And to ensure that, I do that documentation for my Shiomi side of the family, because it's so rich. I have firsthand narratives of people born in like 1880 about their life, like in America. It's like a true American Asian immigration story documented in words and pictures. It's like crazy. Yeah. So it was special. It was a really special
So are
find.
you producing anything with this, like a book or something? Or
Well, so one of the things I have, as much as my grandfather's story touched you, my maternal grandmother, my paternal grandmother's story is mesmerizing. It's so epic. I can't even explain it to you. And I've had friends who she wrote it down in a sort of biography. And I've had friends in media say, you need to do a screenplay on this. This is crazy. And, back 15 years ago, it may not have been the right timing, but it is a strong female Asian American lead that
mm,
is an international story that involves a president signing a law into law. It involves a struggle to survive the communist insurgents back into Korea. It involves passing through Hiroshima. It involves like an American. She was an American, though Americans wouldn't see her as an American, right?
yes.
In a Japanese occupied Manchuria, who was teaching Chinese people English because she loved America, and yet was on the other side of the fence. Because he had a job working for a Japanese refrigeration company, right? And so she was there silently rooting for America while on the other side of the fence,
Wow,
teaching
that
English to, yeah, it's crazy.
did did she how did the Japanese around her treat her? Or did she hide
I think she did it
that part of her?
privately.
Yeah,
She did it
okay.
privately. She was literally, if you just take the ethnic racial stuff away, she
Yeah.
was a child born in 1911 in the US. She was a roaring 20s child and a 30s liberated woman. She married this guy, this Japanese American guy, right? And they went to Japan, which was extremely, and still is, conservative and misogynistic compared to American sensibilities, right?
Yeah, that must have
So
been really hard for her.
it was really, she hated
Yeah.
Japan. She hated it the whole time because women are treated like shit there,
Yeah.
still are, right? And relative to America, right? I'd say that.
Yes.
And so she hit that, but she insisted after the war, we are moving back to America. And she basically forced her husband to go back to America in 1950, 52,
Mm.
because it was just like, but the problem is And this is what's so interesting about two grandfathers and the complexities of immigration in the US, right? So the grandfather you saw on the Facebook story, my maternal grandfather, was born in Central California and went to Japan when he was like 2. And so then he came back when he was 19. So he's really a Japanese person, right?
Yes.
Though he's American citizen. My father's grandpa was born in Japan in 1903, came to America in 1906, and lived his entire life in America. High school, college, work until 1932. He was a trader in a Japanese a trading company on Wall Street. He went to MIT and Harvard, and yet he was not American.
Yes.
He spoke perfect English. It just didn't. It's just because of the early part of where you were born that he could not come back to America with my grandmother, who was born in Seattle, and they had to petition the government to reunite them. It's so funny, but he was totally American.
Yeah. And so that speaks volumes in terms of how our identity, right?
Yeah.
Cultural identity, ethnic identity, national identity, and and all those things, because culturally your paternal grandfather was very American.
Oh,
even though
American.
Nationality, he's Japanese. Yeah.
His citizenship. Yeah.
Yeah, his citizenship, right?
Because he couldn't become an American because of, I think, the Chinese Exclusion Act stuff, right?
Yeah,
they didn't allow naturalization of somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, at that time. Yeah. When did that? Do you know when that got repealed? The Exclusionary Act.
Well, technically, my grandfather's act nullified it, but that was for, well, I don't know when the Chinese Exclusion Act got nullified, but they were able to work around it by just having a reunification of spouses thing.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, we can probably Google it and find out.
We could probably Google it. Yeah. I was just wondering.
So, some would argue it still hasn't been repealed. Right? I mean, it's like,
I wouldn't be surprised if, yeah.
Well, but look, Andrew. Okay, so Andrew Yang's generation were the exceptional visas, right? The Chinese that came in that time were all like educated in upper status within China, right? So his dad I think he came over with IBM and became an executive or something like that. That's why, he went to Phillips Exeter, he wasn't hurting like financially growing up. And so there's a whole generation of Chinese in particular that were exceptional visas. And that was the same with South Asians, with Indians. It's more recently that they became, in the West Coast, in California, the issue that has been the case is, well, Mexicans are mostly not that. They're crossing the border and undocumented and whatnot, versus they're passing this exceptional test, this elite visa test. And so, yeah, it really depends. I don't know. Yeah. This is now immigration history and how everything gets sorted in the U.S., which is very complicated.
It's very complicated. Yeah. I looked into it very briefly. Well, not immigration per se, but just a history of America. During the pandemic, for some reason, I became very interested in history, even more than I was generally interested in history. And and it was triggered by this the polarization that was happening, and on the political realm, and I was curious as to, like, why are we so polarized, and how do we become this way? And so it started there. So I started looking further and further back, and also for some reason I became like I was wondering if this country was gonna fall apart. I kind of like
Trump times, in the Trump era times, or
no, this past year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before the election, I guess.
Before the election.
I wasn't that confident about the election. I wasn't confident that the election would have changed much, because I felt like if there was a different president, it would have some impact, but the country was already so polarized that having a new president was not necessarily going to change how people felt about
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
country. And
Yeah.
to great extent that's true. um you know, to the point where people are, there are huge you know, factions of people who still claim the election was stolen.
Yeah.
And
I, I mean, I've thought about this a lot,
mhm,
and um, you know, I mean, there's no right answer, but like my sensibility around this, will I say there's a polarization? Yeah, more so than normal, right? Uh, is this political sort of I
yeah,
really am in line with Andrew on this sense, is like there's a real economic divide in America,
there
right?
is.
And the folks who would normally vote Democratic aren't, or are pausing because the Democratic Party is not meeting their needs. They're hurting for jobs, and they're hurting for income. And
There's an
we are very unique. You know, you and I in New York and whatever
yeah,
are different part of this country, where others are barely able to just put food on the table. And so
yeah,
they were looking for the Democratic Party to have something on their platform to appeal for them, but there's nothing to be found. And so you go to Trump with these fake promises and
yeah.
platitudes, and then it sounds seductive, right? And so that was the thing that was going on, in my opinion, you know, in summary.
um there is, I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. I think if you but I think there is still a huge swaths of, I don't know, people who um are polarized on the political uh landscape, and they don't, I don't think they necessarily equate the politics with economics. And I think that's what needs to happen.
Sure. Well, yeah.
Well, because yeah, because I think the politics is a veneer that have been sort of painted, and people sort of bought into that. I'm not sure if I'm explaining this.
Well, when you say politics, what do you mean by that? Are you talking about the like elections, or are you talking about people's political viewpoints? Because they're different, you know.
No, not necessarily elections. Political viewpoints. I would actually say political camps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just feel still that largely Americans are single issue voters still. You know, it's just about guns for me, and that is exactly how I'm going to vote across all my interest lines. You know, there's a lot of people in finance in New York who
Yeah.
are just about like taxes and are fine with putting up with a racist, sexist, you know, misogynistic person. You know,
Yeah.
even you know, and it's complicated. That's why I say like politics and who you click the button or whatever for to elect or say publicly or privately who you're for is very complicated. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think you may be right on that front. I think, yeah, there are yeah, I think overwhelmingly people are single issue voters. Um
Like a lot of people are going to vote for Andrew because he's Asian, because they're Asian. It's that's it. That's fine. I mean, even though he might be too like conservative on a certain economic policy for them,
yeah.
they're okay with it, right? And so, you know, I have a lot of pressure too. I'm just kind of like, well, you of course you're supporting Andrew because you know he's your friend, you're Asian, and I'm like, well, technically I'm not supposed to do that, right? Because I don't
Yeah.
want others doing that either. I don't want you
Yeah.
just voting for someone because they're Black or Latino. I want you
Yeah.
to vote because they're the right person. So
Yeah, but unfortunately that's how people vote.
sure.
And that's also, I think, the problem with diversity, and how diversity is implemented, how diversity is sort of, you know, just because you have a minority representative in Congress doesn't necessarily mean they will you know, act in the best interest of that minority group.
That's not their task either.
Right.
They're voted to represent their constituents, and if their constituency isn't that, in theory, they're not doing their job. I mean, that's the struggle with all electeds: is do I vote my conscience, do I vote my constituents, right? So
But that's not how people vote. I think there were some surveys done where people, was it in New York or I forget where,
mhm.
they polled the voters, and it the votes basically fell along racial lines. So
Makes sense. Okay.
yeah, which I don't, yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised by it, but at the same time, like, I don't like the fact that that's, because people are not then voting on policy. They're not voting on, you know, just, well, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let me take a step back actually. So when Andrew Yang first ran for the presidential
President.
candidacy,
Mhm.
um, I liked him based on the several interviews I saw of him.
Mhm.
Based on interviews that I saw of uh, a lot of other candidates,
Mhm.
and comparatively, like, I think I like what he has to say. I like the way he thinks. I think
Okay.
he's practical. He tries to solve problems, and he's not political, right? He, what, yeah,
I
but
mean,
but
he's
at the
not
same,
from, yeah, he's not
he's not
he's not a
from,
career politician.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. So, but at the same time, like, I didn't want to publicly say that I like him as a candidate, because
Hmm.
I didn't want people to think that I like him just because he's Asian.
Yeah.
But that's not the reason why.
Welcome to
Yeah.
Hollywood. What happens all the time? You know, it's like, Asians in Hollywood, I know this firsthand, can't vouch for the Asian position because it'll seem like they're just doing it because they're Asian, and discredit them as an objective sort of thought, like opinion on a particular script or whatever, I mean, but that's the challenge all minority groups face, because majority groups don't have to worry about that as much because,
But
yeah, yeah.
but I feel like Asians do that to themselves more than other minority groups.
I mean, it depends on the topic we're talking about. I mean,
Yeah.
when we're talking about, like, specialized high school admissions or stipends in high school, well, then Asians have the majority opinion, right? You go to Japan and then Asians are majority versus not, right? And so you can't talk about like white people oppressing Asians in Japan. It doesn't make any sense, right?
No, yeah.
Um, so it's contextual. You got to really take it case by case, and in my opinion, look at it through who has power and privilege in the given situation and who doesn't. Who has the wind in their face running the sprint, and who has the wind to their back. And that's the invisible forces that need to be taken into account when you're dealing with diversity, equity, inclusion, and all of these more level setting type challenges that are going on right now in our country. So
Mm. Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. When did you come to New York? So you grew up in
Yeah.
California.
Yeah. So a little bit of background. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, in that area called Sawtelle, Japantown now. I, again, just all public education. I've never been a private college or institution. Went to LA public schools, which is the second largest public school district in the country. Went to UCLA, public institution, and then did Coro. I did the fellows program in Los Angeles. Worked for a few years, 2 or 3 years. I was a biochem undergraduate, so I was literally that good Asian kid tracked toward medicine, right?
Okay.
But all I was doing on campus was just student government and Asian American issues. I was lucky enough to hang around it's called Campbell Hall, which housed Asian American Studies for UCLA, and I was very much connected with a lot of folks there, including Don Nakanishi, who was one of the leaders of Asian American Studies movement in colleges across the country, and a lot of great folks out there. And I decided to do Coro because mostly it was a hedge on not knowing what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
It exposed me to all these different industries, and I decided to support the campaign of a Japanese American guy running for a state assembly after college, after Coro, and he won. But I ended up joining a staff of a Jewish guy more toward where I lived, who became the Speaker of the Assembly for California. And,
so you worked on that candidate's campaign. So you were part of that campaign, worked on it.
I was part of the campaign, yep.
Yeah.
And his primary and general election. I did the primary during Coro, and I did the general election after. I worked in politics, got an incredible insight into how that world works in California. It's kind of close to national because it's so big, how national politics work. And then I got disillusioned by the whole system and wanted to just figure out what I want to do. So I left the country for 6 months. I went to South America,
Oh yeah.
backpacked. Part of it was just to leave, but part of it was also to discover my roots. The Japanese diaspora currently exists in 3 major countries in numbers. The number 1 is Brazil.
Yeah.
There are more Nikkei in Brazil. Nikkei is a term for Japanese of origin, Japanese living abroad. They're in Brazil, and then closely behind that is the US. And then after that is like Peru. There was Brazil and Peru in there. And so I actually ended up befriending a Japanese Brazilian family. It was so cool. Like they were like family, but we kind of communicated in broken Japanese, but mostly it was like, you know, they were speaking Portuguese and I was speaking English. And then in Peru, the same thing. I fortunately was able to meet up with a community of people. I was connected to them ahead of time by people in LA and got to know them. And so it was like really incredibly enriching to see different diasporas play out and how different or similar we are around the globe, right? And then I came back, and getting to your question of when did I move to New York?
It's okay.
Yeah, I taught in public schools for a year because I knew I wanted to do something in education, but I realized public school teaching was not it at all. So I was dating someone who was finishing law school on the East Coast and had a job, a law firm offer for a firm in New York, and decided to move. I just moved. Just went over there.
Okay.
Yeah, so I came in September 2000, August 2002.
What about the education field did you not like? What was it about it that you decided this is not for me?
Well, being a teacher in a public school is not for me. It's all the challenges that any public school teacher talked about, because I pretty much was committed to impact and efficient impact and what I was able to teach and how it was received. Public schools often, at least in LA at the time, we had 35 kids per class. We had 6 rounds, 6 periods. Horrible infrastructure to support disciplinary issues. I was pretty much that was the hardest job to this day I've ever had, period.
Yeah.
Period. Yeah. I would leave school at 3 p.m., go right to a movie theater and sit there and zone out. The greatest day for me was Friday afternoon. The worst time was Sunday afternoon. It was so stressful, it was absolutely, all teachers have different particular experiences. I actually taught in the middle school I attended. That was crazy. I was peers with my teachers for when I was in middle school. So it was like a total behind the curtain experience. And
you taught middle school. You taught middle school?
Middle school.
Yeah, middle school is the toughest period, I think. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know that. I knew that too.
Okay.
But they're also most in need of teachers.
Yes.
Right? So you're at that point where they're not young, so that you're not parenting them like in elementary school. You're not single. You're not multi-subject, meaning you have the same kids through multiple subjects. You have people. You have a lot of kids through different subjects. Yeah. So, and then they're not in high school where school starts mattering. They start mattering then, and they take stuff seriously. Whereas in the middle school, it's just like this middle area where whatever. Their hormones are raging. Yeah. Kind of in the it's so much. So
I think even as a student, middle school is like the toughest period in your life.
Well, it's definitely tough as a teacher.
Yeah.
And so I started on an emergency credential as a substitute, but literally a week later, a teacher had a chair thrown at her face and was out for the year, and I was asked to take over a class. So I took over that class for a year, one cycle, and if I had a front row seat in all the challenges of the country socially, because that's where all the social problems of the country showed up first in schools, public schools. And then, just the challenges that existed within the LA Unified School District that were just, I don't know how you surmount them. I mean, we just had I could not manage the 35 kids at once, particularly the ones who, after they installed the soda machine in our lunch area and after lunch, oh my gosh, this is insane, right? And then, having the support network of teachers who really just doing it out of their own goodwill. If I couldn't discipline a kid, I sent them over to a more senior teacher. And I mean, I'm even sanitizing that. Like it was so hard, and
Yeah.
it felt defeating. You know, they had this teachers union meeting where I went to one time, and then they were giving out these swag, you know, like rulers or pens or something. And I looked at a ruler that was from the UTLA, it was called the United Teachers of LA, and a ruler, I was struck. It said, "Teachers are professionals too." I'm like, why do I have to be reminded I'm a professional? Am I like, it's weird. You know what I mean? It's like, am I not a professional? I don't understand why you have to be validated that you're a professional in this context. It's kind of like when I landed in Quito, Ecuador one night, and it was the middle of the night, got off the bus, and then there's this huge banner on the central square that says Quito es seguro. Quito is safe. And I'm just like, why do I need an affirmation that it's safe here? Oh crap, I gotta run, right? I gotta, so you don't need that in Tribeca. Tribeca is not for murderers. You don't put that there. So that it's just
That's funny.
Yeah.
I wonder though if it was an affirmation to kind of encourage teachers to stay in their profession, kind of like reminding them, hey, this is a noble profession, like, stick it out kind of thing, as opposed to like, what?
Well, I don't know.
I don't know.
What it
Yeah.
was. I just know you feel defeated, overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You feel like second-class citizens. The life of a teacher is different, because I was like a middle 20, late 20-year-old, single guy. You can't hang out with your friends on weekdays. You can't have that drink. You're so tired. You're preparing for the next day mentally and in actuality on tests and homework, because you're just on stage, you're performing, and you have to have a tight routine, and that because every day they're challenging you. They're trying to challenge you, especially in middle school, and you have to be on guard. So you're on from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. all the time. Maybe you take a little mental break at lunch. Maybe you're lucky to have an off period. Maybe you have the honors kids one period, where it's a lot easier. And that's it. And then you're just back on this routine, which is so stressful. It just wasn't for me. I mean, I think for others it was, and it's probably, I could have gotten better at it if I stayed it longer, but that's not how I wanted to educate and teach. And so Coro, the fellows program, became perfect. Manageable class size, people already primed to learn. You have this blend of real world with academic-y kind of stuff. It was like I found my classroom, and that's why I stayed and directed the fellows program for 7 years.
So when you came to New York, you joined Coro, and you managed
not initially. A year and a half, I had a transition job. I ran an AmeriCorps program.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I moved on to Coro, because that was more of a transition job. I got that job a month after I got here. Yeah. And I was just trying to feel out New York. I just wanted to kind of have earn income, and I was living with my then girlfriend, so I had some buffer, right, on financing. But it was just, I was so thrilled to be in New York City. It was so, LA was just like my whole life. I just needed a change. Yeah. And I got it. I mean, talk about one of the most, intense cities there is in the world, certainly in the US. And I was thrown in it at, my late 20s, right? The week of before 9/11, right? And so that was also that symbolism.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. The week before 9/11 anniversary, sorry. Before 9/11's anniversary. Yeah. I did experience the blackout of 2003, but that's not 9/11. That was actually pretty crazy too. So
that was crazy too. Yeah. But you know what? Actually, I think the 2003 blackout, because of 9/11. Yeah. And what New Yorkers went through with 9/11 and the solidarity that they felt, blackout was like nothing. So like there were no riots, no looting, nothing. No. People were having block parties. I know.
Oh, yeah.
Left
bonfires. And right. Marty Markowitz was on the bridge. I was in Union Square. Well, actually, I started in 36th and 8th, and then I thought the power went out on my computer. And then I realized the power was out in my office. And then I realized the power was out in the building because we walked down. And then I walked to Union Square just to walk and noticed, the power's out everywhere. Yeah. Because there's no cell phone, like, the way it is now. You can't find out, right? Really? Yeah. And then I realized, okay, I'll just wait till the power comes back on. I'll sit here. So it was like 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it was like, okay, I got to start walking because it's getting dark. Yeah. So I walked from Union Square across the Brooklyn Bridge back home to where I lived in Prospect Heights. And on the bridge, in the middle of the bridge, is Marty Markowitz going, "Welcome home. You're back. Welcome home." He's just standing there, and it's just like, what a jokester.
Well, he's a
It was great.
character.
It was
Yeah.
great. That was great. It was
Yeah.
just like, I could see why he got elected and reelected. You know, that was a great move. He was on the bridge welcoming
Yeah.
back Brooklyners, you know, so.
But
Anyway.
yeah, but that's it's so Marty Markowitz to do that. Yeah, he's not in politics anymore. Is he still around? Or did he
I
pass?
don't know.
Okay, I don't know.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
But yeah, that's
Yeah.
so I had at the time of the blackout, I was at a workshop or something. Like I was actually on a panel, a speaker panel. I was one of the panelists, and it had just ended as the blackout hit.
Oh.
And so the people, the host, the company that was hosting the event, they came over to us and they said, "Hey, it's a blackout. We all have to walk down." So we walked down, and I think I was in the Wall Street area at the time, and I had just enough battery life on my cell phone to call my brother, you know, to figure out like how I'm gonna get home. And so like we were able to, actually I was in Union Square area by that time, and so he and we met up. But yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, that was the closest I had to 9/11. I mean, 9/11, I was in LA, but that was crazy, right? I mean, it was just, I mean, you were in New York, right?
I was in New York. I grew up in New York. Yeah, actually, Deutsche Bank. No. This is before Deutsche Bank. This is bank. No, this is Deutsche Bank. So Deutsche Bank bought Bankers Trust back in '99. And so the Bankers Trust building was across the street from the Southern Tower.
Oh,
and
wow.
So Deutsche Bank, after they bought Bankers Trust, they took over that building. And so I was actually working there. Yeah, but I was running late.
Oh,
so I
really?
I didn't actually make it to the building. I was stuck in Midtown because by the time I got to Times Square, where I would have to change trains, the train shut down. And so I couldn't make it.
You got lucky then.
I got lucky.
Wow.
Yeah, and later I heard reports that everyone in that building made it out alive except for one security guard. Yeah.
That's crazy. No, I mean, I was just uncomfortably in Los Angeles, and my grandmother, I was actually living with her at the time, and she goes, "Eddie, I think something happened in New York." I literally was like, "Oh yeah," I was looking like, "Oh my God," it's like crazy, right? But my first time I came to New York was during my fellows program. It was because the National Alumni Organization was inviting a representative from every choral center, 5 of them, to come to New York to be on the board for a year. And so I got that honor, and it was my first trip to New York, and obviously I was overwhelmed by it. And our meeting was in, I think it was the 96th floor of the North Tower. So, that was in it was 98, I think. But I was in the tower. I was like, maybe you've been there a ton of times, but I was like, this is the biggest freaking building I've ever seen in my life. It's like wide as a football stadium. I was like, the width of it, the girth of the tower is just so ridiculous. And I remember seeing the view from Brooklyn Heights, and it was like these two rods popping up, and then these like little short grass beneath it, the rest of the buildings now, you know, and now those are the tall buildings, right? But it was so massive. And it's just the thing. And so when I was in LA, seeing the plane go through it, wing to wing, it didn't even traverse it. I remember how big those were. Like, I can't even, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine what was going on. It's crazy. So
I didn't know what was going on because I was on the street trying to get downtown. And so train shut down, all the buses that passed, they were packed. They spilled out onto the street. And so I was like, and the cell phones didn't work, pay phones didn't work, nothing worked. So there was no way for me to contact anyone. Crazy. So one of my sisters happened to work in Midtown at the time, about like maybe 10 or 12 blocks north of 42nd Street. So I decided, okay, you know what? I'm going to walk over to her office and, see if I could maybe use their phone or something. That's when I found out what happened.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
You didn't
because
see smoke? You couldn't see smoke if you looked in the air?
no, you couldn't.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it was
Because
kind of blowing in Brooklyn, I think. So maybe you didn't
yeah,
see.
40 between 42nd Street and Wall Street, it's a huge distance. And also you have all those buildings. I didn't
I
see
thought,
anything.
I thought, no, I couldn't have seen it. I moved after the trade centers were there, but I thought you could look down like one of the avenues, like 8th or 7th, and see downtown buildings, but I don't know, maybe.
I mean possibly, but
Right.
I
Yeah, well,
mean
you did.
I didn't think to look because like I didn't know what was, and they weren't saying anything. The subways weren't saying anything. At first
Yeah,
they were saying
people didn't know,
they didn't
probably.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
okay,
didn't
yeah.
they didn't know what to say. And so yeah, everyone spilled out onto the street, and then but on my way to my sister's office, I stopped. I saw a bunch of construction workers just hanging around at a construction site listening to the radio. So I felt like, okay, something's going on. So let me just kind of like, eavesdrop on the radio, what's
Yeah.
happening. And they were talking about the Pentagon. So
Oh,
so by that time the Pentagon got hit. So
oh,
they were talking about the Pentagon. So I had no idea like anything was going on in New York. And
it's
so
crazy.
I went to my sister's office and I asked for her, and they said everyone's in the conference room. And I'm like, okay. So I go to the conference room and they had the TV on, and that's when I saw they kept looping the planes hitting the towers.
Well, as a speaking of as an ancestry and historian person, because I often thought about what were the biggest events of all my relatives,
Yeah.
um, and the one that I would have wanted to have been around or have been alive to experience, and the one I always go back to is I wish I was there to see the landing on the moon. That was like
Mm.
crazy. It was probably the seminal event of some people's lives. For my family, mostly it's been World War II, something around World War II,
Yeah.
obviously. But 9/11 is it for me, at least. I mean, I can't think of anything more seismic than that. I mean, certainly even for the world, right? It changed the rules of the world.
It
So
did. Not necessarily for the better.
no, that's true. But
Yeah.
I will tell you one thing. I don't recall there ever being an airplane hijacking since 9/11 because there's no chance people would ever allow a plane to be hijacked anymore. They would just raid the cockpit, and it's because they're assuming they're going to die anyways, as opposed to if we just stay calm and
Yeah.
relax, we're going to be safe. Because in the late 70s, early 80s, when all the hijackings were happening around,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, yeah, I was actually freaked out usually on airlines. Like, I hope we don't get hijacked. And then it became a rule. Like you just assume you're going to be used in a 9/11 capacity. So just go after the
Yeah.
hijackers,
Yeah. I think yeah, in that sense, I think yeah. Because I think previous hijacks were about ransom.
Right. But so was that sort of, wasn't it? I don't know. Like 9/11, you don't know exactly what were the rules that were going on. You just know it was happening. And I'm pretty sure that will never happen again on any commercial aircraft. There's just no chance. You're just going to sit there and let it happen. I mean,
Yeah.
this is, and side note, not that that's a good thing. You don't want any hijacking ever to happen, but like weirdly, I thought, I don't think there's ever been one. I mean, there've been crashes, but not specific ones where there was, ransom demands or anything like that happened.
Yeah.
Like Con Air won't happen. That movie won't happen anymore.
No, that won't happen.
Yeah. So, yeah. Wow.
So yeah. So I think you already answered one of the questions I was going to ask is what made you want to dig into your family history in the first place?
Mhm.
But that's you discover this document or this binder your mother I think produced and showed you.
Yeah, well,
Big-
they're threads, right? So I
Okay.
mentioned I found binder of family history. I mentioned this what initially got me into it. Okay, so it was that there was the disconnection with family. Well, that was because of the binder, and I'm a history person in general. I was
Mhm.
always, and I was always into biographies, and I like followed the Kennedys because we were named after Kennedys. I'm Edward Kennedy. My brother's John.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow,
We were
that's
named, we're named with Kennedy. So the family stuff, my dad's favorite movie is Godfather. So it's sort of mine is, it's a family legacy thing, right? So it's
uh-huh.
always in my DNA. Um, I will tell you that that kind of is what trended me in that direction, because prior to that, I didn't have any artifacts, right? And so it's kind of like, I'll just ask people, I'll do video recordings of stories. But when I had this Rosetta Stone, it's like I found Tutankhamun's tomb. So I super got into Egyptology all of a sudden, right? Because I had this like, crazy relics, right? I mean, so I got super into it that way. But what keeps me in it is interesting. It's like this is why Ancestry is so fascinating to me, and actually might shape my future work stuff that I'm doing, even like my core thing, but certainly my side passions, right? So in talking to my first cousin, now that's the only part of the family I ever knew. It's my dad's sister's kids. They're my
Mm-hmm.
first cousins, right? We're about the same age. And I was talking to my cousin Misty, and we were talking about my grandfather that we shared, the paternal grandfather that went to MIT and stuff. And she's about 6 years older than me. And all I remember about my grandfather Roy is he used to be, he had this kind of voice, and when I do something good, he'd pat me on the head and go, "Attaboy, attaboy," right? That's all I remember really of him. Like I was too young, right? But she kept talking about, Grandpa Roy was such a character. He's such a dry wit, and he was so sarcastic, and he would always use them. I'm like, what? I was like, oh, really? Yeah, it was so fun. I'm like, I don't know him in that way. And then I thought, like I wish I did know him that way. Like, because all these photos and timelines and stuff don't reveal that part of somebody, and I just missed it. And I just kept thinking, Ancestry had a progression, right? Like originally it's just storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Someone remembers some great person, Alexander the Great or something, if you're related, and then tell stories about that. And then it became stories with maybe a painting, maybe there's some visuals attached to it. And then it became like, it became words, written word with images. And then it became like, it took a next level up with photography and recorded voices and stuff like that. And now we're on video, right? So historically, Ancestry still is like the org chart that I showed you, just names and whatever. Maybe we're attaching pictures to it now. Now we have video, right? I've done recordings of family histories by these people, including my grandfather, right? I have him talking about his life. But all of this is still
The grandfather that recently passed away, or
yes,
okay.
yes. But like this is all one-way communication still.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've ever seen Black Mirror in Netflix, where this person interacted with like a dead girlfriend through chat history, like
Yeah.
that thing. I actually haven't even seen this episode. What if there's a way I could interact with my grandfather even after he's dead in the way that replicated the way my cousin did?
Uh-huh.
And it just fascinates me because we're kind of on the cusp of that, like,
Yeah.
because as much as pictures and videos, they're great, they're important, but like truly a person is merely their instincts ultimately, and ultimately it's kind of like, a person who has an arm and leg cut off is still the person because you're interacting with them, but the moment they get Alzheimer's or dementia, they stop being the person. So you're really kind of your instincts. And so like, what is it, there's a way to kind of interact with that person, that relative, maybe simply through chat, or maybe even like a true, like full experience like this. Like JJ, right now, what if I told you I had died like 10 years ago and you're just interacting with a simulation?
Yeah, that would blow my mind.
But we're on the cusp of that now.
I know, we absolutely are
yeah,
actually. Yeah.
yeah. And so I just say this is Ancestry for me is not just this passing hobby or a found binder I had in a grandma's house. It really speaks to like the largest questions about what do we do in life and what's the purpose and legacy and all that kind of stuff. So for me right now, I'm focusing on my family. I want to try to write a screenplay about my grandmother's life, and maybe we should talk about that because it's stunning. And collecting as many artifacts and stories from relatives who are still coherent and alive, because I want to get them now. you know, and simultaneously I'm thinking about how do I record my life maybe as a case study for like
Yeah.
interacting, having my cousins or children interact with me, just because it's fun. Why not try it? You know, Google's got all this information already, right? So it doesn't save somewhere. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so I'm really intrigued by this because my sort of career, if I were to summarize it right now, is like it's how technology impacts learning and work,
Mm-hmm.
the future of it, especially, or the present. And this is not really work, but it's more important. This is just your livelihood, you know, family. So
It is. Because it's also well, not just preservation of family history, but history and also culture. And there's so many different, you know,
mhm.
places where something like this would impact.
Yep,
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, to answer your question, I came to New York and oh no, I started Ancestry because of those particular moments, but I was also primed because I am a historian. I love family narratives. Uh, um, they're just the most compelling media for me. Like even in a movie context or whatever,
Uh-huh.
I just eat up biopics. I just
Yeah.
love them, you know?
Yeah, me too. I
Yeah,
love biographies and yeah,
yeah.
and
So,
just yeah. Um um actually yeah, several years ago, I don't know how many years ago. It was definitely more than 10 years ago. I
mhm.
started uh I I decided to interview my mother
Mm. Sure.
to like get her history. Actually, it first started out with me suggesting to her that, hey, I think you should write, a journal,
Hmm.
write your biography, and I think I got her a notebook and all that. And at first she thought it was a good idea, but then she doesn't like writing, so it never went anywhere. Then I decided, okay, maybe I should just interview her. And so I actually recently found where I stored those recordings.
Mm.
Um, I did 3 interviews, and then for some reason I kind of stopped. I don't know why. And then during the pandemic, I threw out the idea to my sisters, hey, we should, all get on video calls with our mother and talk to her about our life so that we could capture it on video. And then maybe I'll transcribe it and do something. But that didn't go anywhere. So I'm like, I'm trying to pursue this for my own family too.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's not that easy. I think you have to like keep going at it.
Yeah, there's definitely people who are not interested in this at all. You know, it's
Yeah.
I assume, oh God, wouldn't this be interesting? It's family, it's your history. And there's some people that are just not, they're not into it. So
Yeah. Cause like how well do you really know your family members and their history? Like, until I actually started interviewing my mother, like I didn't know all those things about her childhood and all that. I think I got up to the point where like in her life where she met my uh father, like how the two of them met. I think that's as far as I went with the
yeah,
interviews.
I
Yeah.
mean, I know the headline stuff of my family. Like we're talking, certainly my grandmother's 10 siblings and then their children. I
Yeah.
know most of them pretty well. I could talk to them about where they live, what school they went to, all that. I've been getting more into the subtle stuff. Like, it's kind of the context is more interesting to me now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, have you ever seen, like sometimes on YouTube they have these old TV shows from the 80s, like Cosby Show or Family, and they show the full episode, but sometimes they show it with the commercials. You ever seen them? The commercials are there.
No,
Oh yeah, they're
really?
commercials. There's full episodes with commercials, and you look at these commercials like, what the hell? It's like, Tang, where's the beef? It's like,
Yeah.
we like it shows up as issues. There was one about the nuclear threat and communism was built into it. I'm like, oh my God, I remember watching this, but this is not my context anymore. Like I'm into those details now of family. So I'm
Yeah.
talking to my dad, or I was talking to other family members about, tell me the smell of like your commute when you went to that job. What kind of car we're driving? How was the
Wow.
gasoline lines? You know, and then they bring up these details I didn't even thought about. Yeah, in the 70s, there were lines for gasoline. It's
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, oh, it took me a long time because why? It's like, oh, because we had to get in line for gasoline in the morning. I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, well, there was a gas crisis. Oh yeah, oh yeah. You can run out of gasoline. Oh yeah, and then, you know, you had to warm up the car in the morning. In LA, it's not as it's an issue now. I mean, New York, you still do it, but you know, in LA, it's not that cold. But you have to leave the car running in the morning for a while, or else you can't drive off. And so I would sometimes do that for my dad. He'd give me the keys. I'd start the car, keep
Mm-hmm.
it in park, and just let the car run. And I was so thrilled because it was the closest thing I had to like driving a car. You know, those things you don't get at the high level. You just don't. You know, it's
Yeah.
like he went to school here. He was went to Manchuria. He did, you know, that. But I was able to get some of that detail from my aunt about my family in Manchuria, about, you know, these little things, these little quirks, like you know, on the boat ride back, they took the last boat from Manchuria to Japan in 1947, and it was all like the last people, and they all lived together for a year and a half. It was a year and a half after the war, I think. And my aunt told me about a ruckus on the deck above in the boat, and she said they found out later there was a fight between the Japanese exiles, right, who are now coming back to Japan, because there's a group there who were apparently pro-communist Japanese who were constantly hitting up the other Japanese to join the Communist Party. And if you do that, you'll get fed and this, and it's a better system. And then you're like, what are you doing on this boat back to Japan? And they said, like, you're a fraud, you scammed us. It was just like this crazy story of these
Wow.
people, like, because yeah, they clearly didn't believe in communism. They're doing it to make money. They were doing it to, like, you know, and it was like, I love that stuff. It's so amazing, right? It's just like,
Wait,
wow, really?
how is that, how does that make you money? What? You said,
Well, this is what I think was going on. I have to investigate this further, but yeah, there were so in the area where there was a lot of Japanese people because it was a Japanese occupation. You know, they had their own Japan set up there a bit. As the war was turning, and it was clear that everyone wanted to leave or they wanted to surrender to the Americans, but the Americans were very far from there. That was Russians, right?
mm,
And Russians were going to treat them pretty badly, right?
yeah.
And so they were thinking ahead, and I think some of them, during the occupation, pro-communist people infiltrated those areas to try to get Japanese people to be pro-communist, because that area was the war. That was the the war for the Manchurian Railroad, right? For the Russians wanted the warm port at Port Arthur, and the Japanese wanted, I don't know, just the zone, right? They wanted the whole area as a part of the occupation. So Russians were very familiar. They wanted to turn Japanese in their favor. They were trying to destabilize the unity of the community. And so they brought in, they turned some Japanese people with promises of food and whatnot. I think there's some Chinese folks who are also going to be pro-communist. And I think they coaxed some people into also being a part of that group in service of, you're going to get some food, because they were starving. I mean, they were just like starving. You know, my dad, our family narrative was always about this apple. They had, for a stretch, only one apple to eat a day, and the four of them would have to cut it equally, and that was their entire food for the day, right? So if you're offering like a bowl of rice or something, oh my God. So they were returning people, and I think they were probably, you know, since there was no food anyway, they were probably getting goods for it, right? My grandmother had to pawn off jewelry and whatever in exchange for food. So I think they were probably getting, you know, resources in exchange for food too, which was not theirs. But I think the thing with the Japanese people was, it was a lack of integrity. It was just like, you were eating well and my family was starving because you were pro-communist, and now you're not. Like, what the hell, right? So
Okay.
yeah, there was a I don't know, I'm speaking on speculation here,
Yeah.
but all I know is there was a big fight on the boat back that my aunt remembers. And so this is more in spirit of, the details are really what make us all rich. It's so
Yes.
rich.
I think it is those little details that sort of bring the story to life, right?
Yeah, make it real human. I mean, we lived those details in our lives, but we don't recall them and can't express them. They just sort of, people now who are young just pigeonhole you as a 70s child or an 80s child, you know, and all the surfaciness of that, when there's such rich detail that if they experience themselves, they would that would make them suddenly relate to you.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm searching for. I'm looking for a connection to my relatives. I want to contextualize them in more than these trite ways I understand grandpa and grandma and whatever. I just think it allows me to appreciate them a lot more. And, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not, that's just for that. I find that fulfilling. I think others don't. Like they want to be forward thinking or something, and they think looking back looks like, why are you doing that? I've actually had that from a Japanese relative say that. And I told them, like, look, I think everything you do is to try to leave a legacy. And even, you had a kid, that's to live forever. Ancestry is the same thing. It's the same longing. You're trying to continue your memory or the memory of your family through this documentation or whatever. So we're doing the same thing. It's just that you're doing it through a traditional mode, and I'm doing it through now a more robust digital way that you do. And he was like, "Oh, that's a good idea. That's true. That's cool." No. He's just a company guy in Japan. He's just like, I don't get it. Why? So anyway, that's why it's a passion for me.
Yeah. Are you writing down your own history, your own personal history?
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't want to. That feels a lot of like creating the folders in your computer before you've created the files. I want to organize it, like part of my journey is this. It's sort of meta. I'm journeying to document stuff, but I'm not doing my own yet. Other than, honestly, you're recording this conversation. That's a form of documentation.
It is actually, and you know what? It's funny that you say that, because I think that's also part of my motivation for doing this as well.
Yeah.
Is by talking to different people and allowing them to tell their stories, and and also a part of me gets injected in that too, as I comment and as I
your instincts and everything. I mean, we can't have Truman Show, right, where every moment is being recorded. That's a little difficult. Although in theory, we are being recorded every moment while we're online, right? But in the meanwhile, I'm not doing that because I first want to capture folks who we're about to lose their recordings, right? We have no opportunity to, and so I wanted to make sure we get as many of those. I get as many of my families as that, and then. And there's been actually practical applications. It's been really. I learned about my family's history of diseases and chronic conditions.
Interesting.
Yeah. So first of all, my family all lives pretty long. Like I don't think any relative has died before 90. We tend to have respiratory issues, but no incidents of cancer or heart conditions. Stuff like that. It's like, oh, that's good. There's definitely a tendency toward Alzheimer's and dementia toward like the late 80s. So it's been cool. You learn some things that are actually applicable.
Yeah. Just as you were talking, for some reason, I forget what it was that you said, but it kind of reminded me of this Japanese artist. Forget, was he in the 70s or 60s? And he lived in the US and Europe and all over the place. But one of the things, I went to his exhibit several years ago. I forget his name, but one of the things that was exhibited was for I forget how many years, but every day he would send a postcard, stamp it with, "I woke up at, on this date at this time," and he would send these postcards to his friends. And so in order for that collection to be exhibited, somebody had to curate all those postcards from all his friends. And it was a way of him sort of documenting, I think, his own life.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and then that reminded me of a time when I was in high school. This is like before bus, the subway tokens and stuff, before Metro cards, where you had to on buses you would get these transfer slips, and I actually
No. There's house cleaning that.
Okay.
They always come, and I just want to tell them no because we're in the middle of podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you in a hotel?
No, it's just the
Uh,
apartment you
oh,
rented.
okay,
But
you're renting.
yeah, but they
Okay.
have this regular cleaning service. I'm like, that's awesome.
Oh,
But
yeah.
they come, they knock at random times of day, and if you're not here, they still come into the apartment. So I'm
Ah,
kind of like, we got to stop this. This is not appropriate, right? So
that's
anyway,
funny.
that's a lot.
But
That's a long story. Just keep going. Sorry.
but so I started collecting these bus transfer slips because
Okay.
it recorded the time of day, the bus
Oh,
line, and the date. And
oh, that's
so
cool.
yeah, so I did this for like either several months or up to a year.
Okay.
I think I lost them all, but I
Oh,
I did it because during that time I wanted to sort of document where I was,
well,
and like on a day-to-day basis.
well,
And
now you have this tracker, the phone. Just go to Apple has all of it, or somebody does.
yeah, somebody does. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is not that much fun. I think the bus slips are much more fun. So if I were to like pull out any random bus slip, depending on the bus line,
Yeah.
time of day,
Yeah.
like I would have a general sense of like where I was going, what I was doing, at the time. Yeah. I don't know
See,
why.
that's cool and a lot of effort from someone our generation, but younger generations are you just have your phone. Just look at the timestamp. Look at the timestamp on the text signature. Like go back on the IP address and see where you're located. Or whatever. I don't know. Like there's it's
Yeah.
funny. It's just not going to be relevant for kids later. I often think about that too because like
Yeah.
there are certain things that weirdly they find really cool that I thought was pretty trite. I'm trying to remember what was an example of that. No, it's just funny. Things that you think they'll think are cool or be relevant aren't.
Right.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
like really into. God, what were they into? Like I never thought anime would be this big. What the hell? Like Japan became relevant to an entire generation of young people because of Pokemon. Like I thought
Yes.
people just got into Japan. No, they got into Pokemon because it was their childhood, and a lot of them are fetishy kind of in Japan. That's why they like Japanese stuff. Before I could never get anyone to be interested in ramen noodles. I couldn't get interested. Sushi was kind of a thing. It was already
Yeah.
an elite class thing.
Yeah. It's a cuisine. Yeah.
Yeah, and but
Hot.
they just got into hot. Yeah,
Hot.
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 Yeah. So they got into that stuff, and it's like so funny what the access point became for Japan, but it's just really like anime and video games, and because it was so formative in their years. It was in mine too. I was very into video games and animation, but it literally is people's identities now. Like my little brother's best friend from high school, who's a black kid, lives in Japan permanently now because of it. He's like totally just an anime guy and established his own YouTube channel and is married to a Japanese girl now because of Pokemon.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah.
I actually came across that whole subculture,
Mm-hmm.
and the Japanese company I was working for at the time um, became one of the donors for Japan Day, which got started like maybe 2008 or 2009 or something.
Mm.
Like the Japanese consulate at the time
Oh yeah.
wanted to do something to sort of commemorate the U.S.-Japan relationship and that sort of thing.
Is
And
that the
thank
thing
you.
they do in Central Park every year?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if
That's
they
like
still do
Sandra
it.
Endo hosts it, right? Yeah. From New York One. She used to host it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
that's all I
but
know.
I do know. I think it started with the Japanese consulate
Mm-hmm.
at
Yeah.
the time, and so they spearheaded it. And they reached out to all the Japanese corporations and basically strong armed them, like, "Hey, we're doing this. You need to donate money, and you need to send volunteers and all that."
Wait,
So I was
did you work for Nomura? Who are you working for?
Mitsubishi.
Oh, Mitsubishi. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, so I went, and one of those Japan days, there were all these people dressed in like anime characters, and I'm like, "Oh, this is so cool."
Cosplay. Yeah.
Yeah, cosplay. I thought it was part of the Japan Day festivals. No.
No, do you know what it's like to go to the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens during the Sakura Festival now? It's a cosplay convention.
Wow.
It's Comic-Con. It's essentially Comic-Con. Like this is not what happens in Japan in Sakura days. It's like people appreciating that they have a picnic, whatever. It's just all these young kids dressed up as all these like Sailor Moon and every character, like doing, I don't know what they're doing. It's just a fetish. Like, and look, I'm happy there's an interest in Japan, but it's a fetishy thing, right? It's like so funny.
But you know what? I mean, these days, like, okay, for the past, like, I don't know how many weeks, I've been obsessively watching and listening to BTS. And
well, they're legitimately big, you know, they're like, it's not a fetish to be into BTS, right? So
but I wouldn't call it a fetish. I would say their fans are definitely devoted. They have
Koreans, by the way, own Hollywood now. You know that, right? They've owned it for a while. Like,
really,
both in the talent, like, with, you know, you obvious people like Stephen Yu and Sandra Oh and Randall Park, who again I grew up with. So weird.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, I put that in the word sheet. I went to middle school.
Yeah, we should show that at some point. Yeah.
But you know, even executives, you know, and certainly with Parasite and even Minari,
yeah.
Like LA is already a Korean town in terms of Asians, because it's like a massive Korean community there. But Hollywood really, I don't know what it is. Like, it's just like Koreans run it from Asian American people.
I think because entertainment is a huge business in Korea. So it
more so than China or Japan, or is it? I don't know.
Actually, yeah, I think because Korea exports entertainment in Asia. They basically have the Asian market. So all of Asia love K-pop, love Korean movies, you know. So it's been booming for a while. It's only recently that I think it's come to the European and the American markets.
Yeah, I'm all for it. They're awesome.
But anyway, so I kind of got into them because a friend of mine, who's not Korean, really got into the whole K-pop dance thing, particularly BTS. And I just found it curious that a non-Korean is this devoted and this enthusiastic about a K-pop group. And I think I came to understand like their hugeness when they did last year. They did a
Grammys, right?
Well, before the Grammys, they did the NPR thing when they released the Dynamite single. They did I think they call it a desktop concert or something like that. And somehow I got wind of it. I'm not the most current in terms of pop culture, but anyway, so if I hear about something, that means everyone has already heard about something. So I was watching this and I kind of got curious about it, but the reason why I kept watching BTS music videos was because I couldn't tell them apart. There's 7 of them. They all looked alike. And I'm like,
it's Clone Wars, yeah.
I know. Yeah. This is like, it's crazy. So I kept watching.
If you were white, you'd be racist if you said that.
But I don't think that should be a racist comment though, because it's true. Until you get used to a group of people and you see them over and over and over again, it's really difficult to tell them apart.
Have you spent most of your time not around Asians, would you say?
Depending on what period of life.
Well, I can see that from someone who's never really been around Asians to partition the difference between those, that group. It's hard. It's hard in general, but like if you're used to just discerning Asians, it's not that hard, right? They have unique hairstyles and the clothes, there are things that are identifiers for them,
Sure. Yes. But when I first started working for the Japanese company, I couldn't it was difficult for me to sometimes tell them apart. Like,
Yeah,
and
I
the
get it.
names, they all sounded the same.
Yeah,
They all sounded like Nakajima or Nakamura or something, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean,
um
it's just how it's just brain science.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
And the more exposed you are to certain things, the more you're able to make the distinctions and identify the, you know. Anyway, so that's why I started watching a whole bunch of BTS videos, just so that I could start telling them apart. Now I could spot them. You know, you could just like, you could give me random photos, random videos, and I could tell
I
you
go,
who's who.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
But
get you. That's
but
cool.
but it took me a while. But anyway, but in the process though, I have now fallen in love with them. You know,
Wow.
yeah, no,
Okay.
I think it's kind of, I think BTS, the group, is kind of unique in the way they in their music, I think in their lyrics. One of the BTS group members actually is part of the songwriting team, so I think he writes the lyrics, and I think they also do sort of participate in a lot of the aspects of how the
Hmm.
song gets produced and all that. But it's also like, there are a lot of behind the scenes videos too, so I've been watching them,
Cool.
and they do reveal a lot about themselves. And so this is that generation where their whole life is, open,
Yeah.
and yeah, people can
Well,
watch them.
I think this thing that's hard to relate to, that isn't so much as like showing what group you're into or the music you listen to, is the normative behavior around, um, I call it the reduction of the delayed gratification sensibility. Like if you asked me BTS and I didn't know who they were or something, what would I have to do? I'd write it down. I'd put it in my pocket and wait till I can go to a library or an encyclopedia, right? Then I go look for it, and then I answer my question. Now you just go, shh, it's like immediate, right? And there's something about that is a true generational thing that has changed, that I've seen play out, and I don't know what the implications of that are, but we definitely are not we're from a delayed gratification world. Our parents and grandparents were from a much more delayed gratification world, right?
Yeah.
So that period it's like how long, like if a New Yorker goes to a restaurant abroad or like in say Mexico, they are frustrated because this takes a long time to get your order because you're used to it having to come in from the time you get order and to the time you get your food, a certain expectation. And that's the case with young people. They have no tolerance for waiting. Not only that, they have to multitask. You have to do multiple things at the same time.
Yeah.
So going back to our previous conversation, around mediums, platforms, Twitter, whatever, Facebook, like that stuff is fundamentally changed, and that's why your long form is much rarer. Like, I have a lot of writer friends, novelists who stopped writing because they say no one reads anymore, and they certainly not going to read a novel. It's just I can't get my stories out there because I want to write a story, but
Yeah.
they don't have the patience to read it in that form anymore. So how can I find other ways to put it out there?
I
So,
wonder, I was never a book reader. Like, I would never sit down with a novel and read.
me neither. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yep.
was never that
It's
person.
got to be a movie or television show.
Or articles. I would read articles, I would read
Sure.
short stories, like short
Sure.
forms. Like, I could
Yeah.
do that, but I wouldn't sit for like days, reading
Right.
things. But Audible has changed that, actually. So I'm
Oh.
not sitting down and reading.
Yeah.
And I may be listening to while I'm doing something else, like doing chores or walking or whatever. So, you're not like 100% paying attention to what you're listening to. But at the same time, um, I am consuming a lot more books
Mm.
that way. And I would imagine that that's true for a lot of people too, like, driving or whatever.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I did that 20 years ago. I actually went forward and bought this cassette tape collection, great classic audiobooks on tape, but it's
Yes.
summarized. It's not like fully
Ah,
read,
uh-huh.
and because I saw 100 books that I'll never read, but I know would have been really useful on the SAT. Got to be honest, because that's where they based all these like word passages and and I just took it in that way. And I always thought like, I wish I had the ability to like touch like an X-Men, like touch a book and absorb it instantly. I just go through Barnes and Noble and just touch. Because how much of there's so much incredibly well thought out and curated information and stories in there, and we'll never see it. We'll never experience it.
But here's the thing. If you were able to do that, how much of what you consume are you actually able to process and retain?
Let's give it a go. I don't know.
I think that's the problem too. I think the reason why it has to be instantaneous now is because there's so much available at our fingertips and we can't retain them. I don't remember anything anymore. I have to constantly look things up because I can't remember things.
Well, yeah, there's a notion that like in your, what do you call it? There's like, what was the term? There was the way you partition the computer, there's the external memory, and then there's the immediate access memory.
Yeah.
So yeah, in your immediate access place in that CPU, that's too much. But if you download it to the cloud now, right?
Yeah.
Then that's where you store all your other memory, your stored pictures, but you can access it pretty quickly. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think there'd be a problem with information overload.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that because it does take time. Because I think in order for something to get to the recessive memory, long-term memory, is that I think it does need to go through some form of process, and I think or repetition, right?
Yeah.
Either repetition or some sort of association or something, or a combination of all those things in order for it to really become long-term memory, which then you could access, and it's not short-term memory. Short-term memory comes and goes. So short-term memory is like RAM, I guess.
Yeah. Yes, RAM.
Yeah. Long-term memory is the hard drive. Yeah.
Right. No, but like people now are. This is just frustrating. I can't remember what exactly was going on, but there was a movie on that I watched in the theater, and I was watching it with someone younger. Maybe it was my cousin or nephew or something, and they were watching the movie while on the phone.
Yeah.
Right? And then I go, well, you're not paying attention to movies. Yeah, I am. And then I asked them a question about a scene where they didn't look at the screen, and it was so critical that they were looking at the screen. I was like, oh, you remember this part? Oh yeah, this happened. I go, no, it didn't. Did you see what was going on the screen? I go, what? And then they go, oh, okay, that changes things. See, you can't say that it's the same thing because you're multitasking, and so that's a loss. That's a real loss that's going on. Yeah,
it is a loss, and I'm notorious for multitasking too, especially if I'm watching something. So I don't know. Have you watched Game of Thrones?
Yeah, of course. I
well, I don't. Some people haven't still, but anyway, Game of Thrones. Where Tom and Baratheon, he jumps out. Kills himself.
Commits suicide.
Commits suicide. So at that point, I wasn't watching. I was just listening, and then I hear.
Oh, you didn't know.
I didn't know, and the next thing I do, next thing I hear, a couple of scenes later, Cersei is saying, looking at the Tommen's body and saying, bury him next to his brother or something like that, and I'm like, bury who next to brother? Who's that? So I had to rewind. Somebody died. I had to rewind, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's very significant.
To use a metaphor,
yeah,
I always thought, like, when you ever go to a MoMA or a museum like that, especially in MoMA, right? Have you ever been to MoMA when it's empty? It's awesome.
Yeah,
it's a totally different experience than when it's like hordes of people, right? And I am sure that the exhibits were meant to be experienced when it's mostly empty, not when you got 10 people moving around as noisy and whatever like that. And it's something to be said about the medium. Like, I don't think people are creating the Game of Thrones episode assuming you would not be paying attention to it, right?
Right.
But maybe they should now. It should be a distraction proof, right? Somehow, like you create a series where you're assuming they're on multiple other things,
I don't agree. I don't agree. I don't think technology should pander to this. I don't think it's a healthy behavior that we're constantly like partitioning our attention to, multiple tasks.
When have we ever done things that are for health? I mean, come on, it's going to be like optimizing for the medium,
Yes.
I think so. I think I'm just saying that to say that your experience of Game of Thrones, it's common. but you don't know that you missed it either unless you're lucky enough to have that callback. That wait a minute,
Yeah.
what are the? Some people miss it and don't even realize it and go on with their life with this arrogance and assumption about the confidence of their knowledge, and they don't know. They just don't know. This is all about those people who, there's all these, 5-year-old experts on topics because they did a quick, deep Google search on something like criminal justice, and then they spout out the words from these academics and they think they know it. It's like they're experts.
Yes.
There's a name for that. I forgot. And you're sitting there going, wow, you're actually know
There
these
is.
very terms, but you
Yeah.
don't know it. You're like completely, it's like Good Will Hunting. It's like an abstraction for you. You never experienced anything related to it.
There is a term for that.
Yeah,
I forget what
it
it
was.
is, but
Yeah.
yeah, but you're right. And so right, that's why I think like we shouldn't reward that behavior by pandering to it and making it easy for people to continually like partition and be sort of this, I don't know.
Well,
I
I'm not one to set policy, right? You're saying like this was what it should be. I've learned to sort of, unless it's like really evil, try to let people need like organically experience it and
Yeah.
see what shows up. Because I want to be open to learning.
Yeah.
I'm okay with like, a kid on 2 different iPhones and an iPad and a TV watching a movie they've never seen before, because I want to see what happens. I'm interested.
Yeah.
Now it's just not the same, because I think movies have become not what they used to be, because there's the dedication to experience the movie is different now that you're not in a movie theater all the time. I mean, that was it. You had to be in a movie. Remember, JJ,
Yeah.
when you watched, for me, the first like movie rental, there was a time before movie rentals. Now, even saying movie rentals is a little anachronistic for young people, right? But I rented Top Gun. I think it was my first movie rental. But it was at the time when Top Gun just kind of came out, right? It was like but remember, before that, when you went into a movie theater and you saw a movie, you will never watch it again. Unless it's like a rare reappearance of the movie. When you saw Jaws in 1977,
right after it comes off the screen,
or
so
unless they put it on TV,
yeah, that's
right?
true. Yeah,
you never saw it again.
Yes.
And now it's so cheap. Like
Yeah.
I can watch a movie now while I'm talking to you, right?
Yes.
I can watch that movie. And there's a devaluation of the movie experience that I grew up with, which was so sacred, that it's just not there anymore. And it's I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but people are not paying attention to movies, and therefore I think it's not having the impact that it was before. Because I love movies. I am such a movie fan as a medium, as one of the most effective mediums to leave an impression and tell stories in the last minute. Now, the thing that I think is an advancement recently is the golden age of television now. And I don't even know if Game of Thrones is considered television, but it's definitely a writer's world now, because the writers own television and directors own movies, but now you can tell long form movies, right? So the writers, the Game of Thrones was an example of the height of that. And so was Breaking Bad. And so is, all these others.
Yeah. Also, I think Netflix, when Netflix started,
the House of Cards, right? This long series release.
Yeah, that they understood that people were binge watching, and so then we'll release one season at a time and also allow this sort of long form storytelling. This is also part of, I was actually going to allude to that when you were saying like long form conversation is dying. Maybe that's true, but long form storytelling is actually kind of on the rise through these like series.
No, for sure. I mean, look, like, I don't know if you know The Godfather, part 1 and part 2, especially, but part 3. Do you watch The Godfather?
Yes.
Okay, so do you know that some people, like Godfather 1 and 2 are unique because they both won Best Picture. It was like crazy. A sequel won a Best Picture, right? But the Godfather 2 story was incredibly like, it was like not the ideal Godfather they wanted to run. And the reason was because one of the main characters in the movie in real life held out and made an almost ransom demand to Coppola in the studio to pay him a lot. And therefore his character was axed and was supposed to be the main character or the second main character in the series. So I don't know if you remember. If I say names, you won't remember what I'm talking about here?
No,
Godfather.
yeah, go ahead, say it.
Okay, so
Maybe,
there
yeah.
was a character in the first movie named Clemenza. Okay, so he was a fat guy. He was like the guy who's like, get the cannoli. Remember?
Yes, yes, yes.
So there's two partners that Don Corleone had. It was Clemenza and Tessio.
Yeah.
Tessio was killed at the end because he was disloyal, and they killed him, and Clemenza lived on. In the second movie, there's this character named Johnny Five Fingers, Pentangeli.
Okay.
He was
Yeah.
supposed to be Clemenza. All right, he was the person who grew up in the old school Godfather world with the dad, right?
Yeah.
Don Corleone, the original, not Michael Corleone. And he was seeing the times change, and the young son of his partner, who was his dad, taking over and being all into this like finance and gambling, and this is not how he did it. And then he eventually turned to the FBI and sold him out, right? But he knew that he had a lot of leverage there and demanded a ton of money from Paramount. And then they said, we can't pay you that, so we're going to kill your character, even though it's a kicker. And they hired in this random other guy to sort of be, oh yeah, he died and then you took over. And it just never quite sat with me until you understood the backstory, that it was all on the negotiation side, on the actors. And that's why the story couldn't be told as they wanted to tell it.
Interesting.
That's why Godfather 3 didn't have Tom Hagen. It didn't have Robert Duvall in it because Robert Duvall refused to be in it, but he was supposed to be a main character in Godfather 3. And that's why the Godfather 3 movie sucked, kind of. But I'm just saying this to say this. Yeah. The long form release works better from a storytelling and actor standpoint because you're not waiting years after the release to rehire and renegotiate the contract. You're doing it all at once. So there's continuity to a character line because you know the character will still be there because they're under contract. Because you're filming 1 year in like a short amount of time versus what they did in sitcoms in the 80s is you filmed an episode, you released it and saw how the ratings were, and then you changed it week to week, right? Yeah. So it's great. I love it. I think it's produced better material. Game of Thrones as an example, saved the last 2 seasons, whatever, but no, but because they lost the source material.
Yes,
like JJ,
I know.
Yeah, he wasn't writing it. They weren't. The producers can only adapt. They couldn't create original screenplays, and so it was pretty clear, right? It was
yeah, I mean, and there are plenty of like YouTube channels that talks about Game of Thrones that go into like what they could have done differently in terms of telling that story. That whatever. Yeah.
So that's crazy. That's crazy. What were you gonna say? I'm sorry.
I don't remember, but that's okay. But yeah, so we kind of like morphed into storytelling, but that is what it's about, right? That's whether it's legacy or even moving forward, right? It is because moving forward, we're creating our stories or creating our future legacies, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't think in that way. I mean, I still think stories are the most primal form our brain was created for memory. We remember things in stories, in parables. That's why the Bible is the way that it is. That's why things.
Legends.
Yeah. And so the brain is still wired for that to be the most sort of easy to adapt kind of mode of communication. But, most people nowadays, until they're older, I don't know if they're into that. They're just about, we're capitalists, right? A lot of people just look at money and experiences and stuff. Storytelling is something people appreciate later, I find a lot of times. It's rare for folks who are not on like their deathbed or like toward the end of their retirement lives where they start really getting into that stuff,
I remember what I was going to say. So this is like maybe a couple of subjects ago. I think there's a part of me that is dragging my foot in terms of how fast technology is progressing. There's a Luddite part of me that like maybe want to slow things down.
Okay.
I'm definitely not an early adopter. I would say maybe I'm like sort of in the middle or middle ladder.
Where you're the middle of the bell curve, not the beginning or the late, maybe.
Okay. I'm not the last adopter either. I think I'm fairly average. But when I adapt, I think I do adapt quickly, I think.
Okay.
But But anyway, uh, well, because I think you were commenting, because I was saying a lot of shoulds. Like, I don't think it should happen this way, and because I'm making value judgments,
Mhm.
and you were countering that and saying, well, I just want to let things happen and see what happens. But I think there's a part of me that want to slow things down,
Okay,
and I think that's
sure.
why I kind of come from the perspective of like maybe that shouldn't happen, or maybe this should happen. I don't know.
Well, what do you mean? What would slowing down look like? Like what's going too fast for you?
Um, right. So earlier you were saying like maybe movies would be produced or filmed or differently to sort of accounting for people who multitask as they're watching
Oh yeah, okay.
things. Yeah, I don't think that should, because I think that's sort of pandering to the not better nature.
Well, it would be something very difficult for a director to agree to. Like, oh, by the way, water down your original idea. I mean, they already do that, right? Like,
Yeah.
studios already mess with the integrity of their vision, but there's no way logistically with all the pipeline you have to go through and the incentives for the people to do it for that to happen anyways. I'm just saying, if you want to optimize the viewer's experience, that's
Hmm.
actually what you should think about. Assume they're distracted, you know? Um, so, what would a museum look like if it was designed? This is now my Parsons design background. What would a museum look like if it was designed from the perspective of a distracted, like attendee or a customer or whatever at a museum? It would look different. The way the exhibits, the way you curated it, the room size, right? You know,
Yeah.
we did this exercise with the bike share system in New York. What does the bike share system look like from the perspective of a person in this neighborhood, or from the perspective of the neighborhood council, from the perspective of the mayor, from the perspective of the region, from the perspective of the world, from the it all looks different depending on the scale of which you're looking at it and how you're deciding to prioritize the design sensibility.
Mm.
So same thing here. I just really believe in that because you can't avoid it anyways. I mean, you and I will. I mean, our grandparents will probably still lament the fact that, we watch like things on a screen and not in person in the theater,
Yeah.
right? Because it is a very different. There's no energy. Where's the crowd? There's no experience. You don't get to dress up. It's not like a thing. You're just sitting at home and you just like brought out your TV dinner and just watching this thing. Ugh.
It's
We should
not an
get
event. Yeah.
right. Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
same thing. See, I'm saying it's generationally, it's all
Yeah.
relative. So your generation's notion of, oh, times are changing, there's a loss here.
Yeah.
That
But
new
there
generation's gonna feel the same way. Yeah.
yes, but I think we could still say those things without necessarily making value judgments, like one is better than the other, because I think there is a loss that we don't go to the theaters anymore because we don't have those communal experiences, and
Well, I think
know
it's a change for sure.
it's a
There's a
change. Or
loss, but there's also a gain because change will involve losses and
yes,
gains, right? So
exactly,
yeah,
exactly, there's a
yeah,
trade-off. Yeah, you
yeah.
lose something, you gain something, and
Hmm.
and it's different. Yes.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah,
We're
that
going
is
through
true.
that with the whole remote working thing right now. Are people going to go back to offices? There's a loss and not going to the water cooler or going into the
Yeah.
physical office, but there's a gain.
Yeah.
There's no lost time on commuting. There's no overhead costs with office leasing. There's no, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No,
same thing.
absolutely. And like you, what you're doing now, you're a digital nomad. You're in Mexico.
I think of a digital, I'm a remote worker because I can't physically be in my office anyway. So why be
Yeah.
why if I'm going to work out of my apartment, which is not that big, why don't I work at and it was freezing, right?
Yeah.
Recently, it's kind of maybe cold. Why don't I go to a place where I could just walk out and be 3-minute walk to the beach, which I am, and
So you have not officially left New York. You're still a New York resident.
yes, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. This is again what happens
Yeah.
with technology and how it changed the parameters of what you thought was possible. Well, now, why can't I do this in freaking Singapore?
Yeah. You
And I'll
absolutely
have better
can.
food.
Yeah.
the time zone thing's the consideration, because you can't get around that. I would have to work at, what is that, 15-hour difference? I don't know what the time difference is, but
About
that would
12
be,
hours from New York.
yeah, that would be hard. I would be
Yeah.
completely off cycle. So when everyone's sleeping here, I'm working, right? Depending on how I stagger meetings, like digital nomads have figured out a way to be off hour. So you figure out how to partition synchronous and asynchronous work, right?
Yeah.
So meetings, if you do traditional Zooms, you got to be on those, but the work can be siphoned elsewhere. And so this is exciting. I think it's really cool,
Yeah. I actually, I that was one of the things that I sort of, dreamed of doing when I left my corporate job, is like, hey, if I can figure out a way to just work remotely, I could be anywhere. I could be on a multi-year long road trip through, America, United States and Canada, and work,
You could have, well, if you were, I don't think you're working when you did your road trip, right?
I wasn't. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Here's the challenge though. I have no sense of a weekend. That
is true. Yeah.
It's just, I'm constantly working, and I actually feel some stress as a result of that. It's not because I have that much work. It's because there's no partition of going home and I'm off now. And I'm on. Yeah. It's like the whole take vacations whenever you need it policy, which is bullshit, right? It's just, you just know you need to be forced to be off,
It's also, it's also the kind of go consulting or freelance, like you're your own boss and that sort of thing. No, because you have to constantly chase after that next gig. And so you're actually in some ways working more and,
But that would have been in play even during pre-remote times, because you could still do that while reporting to an office, right?
Yes.
Now it's just uniquely, I don't even know what day of the week it is, JJ. I don't know. I think it's Thursday or Friday.
It's Friday.
It's Friday. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was like a Saturday one time, and I was like, what's going on here? There's so many people. Oh, it's Saturday.
I have to constantly look at my phone to check what day of the week it is, what date it is.
I don't know anymore. I literally don't know. I roughly know we're in April, May. Okay. Yeah. But I have no sense of weekends anymore, because there's no difference between a weekend and a weekday for me. Except if I have a scheduled meeting, that tends to happen. But I don't feel relief on Friday night or afternoon. I don't feel anything. It's just when I go home, I might as well get ahead of the work I have to do, because it's project based, right? So that's a loss, actually. It's kind of nice to know when you couldn't be reached on email and you couldn't respond to anyone, you were totally off the grid. I could totally immerse myself into something, and now I can't do it. So,
So there's that. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, there are some advantages of having
you're an anti-technology person or advancement.
I'm not anti-technology. I just think I don't think technology is the be all and end all to everything.
I don't either. Yeah. I don't either. Yeah. Okay. So there's a moment when I realized I always thought I was hip. I kind of kept up with the trends. I was using Google in its full way, with docs and sharing and, all the latest technologies, not social media as much, but just work technology.
Yeah.
And then I was working with Andrew at Venture for America, and there was a story that came out that, a lot of the employees were just recent college grads. So I was a good 15 years older than them, maybe, right? Almost a generation. And they were talking about, I noticed a story about this guy named Mante Tayo. He was a college football player at Notre Dame, and he was being investigated for some sort of fraud or something because he had sent money or something to his girlfriend somewhere, but they realized later that they were questioning whether it was his girlfriend. And what had happened is he was catfished. He actually had a girlfriend that he'd never met before, and they were because they were interviewing it. So who's this girlfriend? Well, I've never met her.
Never met face to face, but did correspond electronically.
Yeah, but not video. Right. Okay. That was a little before it was more, easy to do video.
Yeah.
So he'd never seen this person really, except maybe an image. but had chatted, right? Texted. And then they asked him, who's your girlfriend? It's like, well, this person. It's like, but I've never met her. It's like, come on, stop making bullshit. It's like, no, what? And then they were mutually confused. But then I talked to the young people at the office and I was like, well, yeah, what's the big deal? I was like, you can call someone your girlfriend and never meet them. I'm like, okay, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
What the hell are you talking about? And then I realized, wow, I have now reached a line where I could not understand it. And now this is technology. This is young people who are so used to calling people friends, they just chatted with. And then that could just rise to a level of relationship. So this girlfriend of his was not real. It was a guy posing as the girl, right?
Yeah.
Just catfished or whatever. And he later was heartbroken, but instead of it being intentional fraud or whatever, it was unintentional. So he just looked silly. He looked like a fool or something. You can Google that. I don't remember the exact details. I might be getting it wrong, but the whole point was I didn't understand that technology had shortcutted the entire courting process and the bar to considering someone, that he was in love with her. He was in love with someone he had never seen.
So
that wasn't good.
I would actually categorize that as a problem because I think it does shortchange the younger generation in the ability to socialize. And
relative to our level of socialization, though, for them, they're not missing anything. They don't know what they're missing, right?
They don't know what they're. Yes, I know, but this is. I think okay.
We don't know what we're missing either, JJ. We didn't know what we're missing from our parents and grandparents' generation.
Yes, you are right.
See, it's relative.
Yes, you are right. Okay, fine.
Well, I'm not trying to be right. I've just tried to say, it's time moves on. Time moves on.
I get your point, but I just think that there really needs to be face-to-face interaction. I mean, it doesn't have to be all the time, but at some point, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, is there going to be a point where there's no need to meet in person for anything? I say yes. Anybody, any human will never have to meet another person.
Yes. So if the whole VR thing progresses to the point where you can physically simulate, physical experiences as well,
right?
Then people will be having VR sex, VR everything. Yeah.
I mean, like I said, JJ.
Yeah.
How do I know you're JJ? I don't know. Someone sent me an email and it responded to my no, really. Like you could be a simulation from the future that comes off as a real person.
No, absolutely. We're kind of getting
Black Mirror.
Well, also it's a philosophical argument as well, right? What constitutes actual experience? Yeah. So
I say, and you can be simulated for me because I don't know you super well. I know you, but I don't know you enough to say, wait a minute, that was weird. That's not you, right?
Right.
Like your sisters or family. But most people don't have that level. I mean, look, let's say you were literally in the room next door in New York to me, all right? Like, is it so important that I meet you in person for coffee and have this talk? Like, is that more important or is this fine? Like, this is fine. Like, you know what I mean?
This is fine for this purpose, but I would say, if I were to generate income through this and actually get a physical studio, I would actually invite guests to come over physically and have this conversation one-on-one, face to face, because I think even though video is a fair substitute in circumstances where face-to-face meetings is maybe not practical, right? Because this way I could talk to anybody around the world anytime, whatever. But if I was not constrained by resources and means, then I would actually prefer to have a face-to-face meeting because there is that added nuances that happen in communication.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
But that's the holodeck. That's happening. It's gonna go that way. If you have a robust, we're in this,
Right.
we're in this pager era of technology.
Right.
We're in this tweener technology era right
Yeah.
now, right? Eventually it'll be this, but before it was a pager. That was a better thing from the landline to the cell phone, right?
Yeah.
We're now in this Zoom era, which is the substitute between the real person interaction and the holodeck, the virtual Star Trek holodeck.
Yeah.
When that becomes a reality, we are all virtual. Why? It's literally, you can't tell unless you're feeding me food and I can't eat it, right?
Yeah.
I don't need to touch your hand or smell your hair or breath or something. I just need to have most of that experience of the nonverbal communication, the body language, right?
Yeah.
And some people don't want that. What if you're sort of not able-bodied or you're whatever? Like some people would prefer the avatar of the virtual room, right?
No, that is true.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think, yes, in that sense, I think it does offer opportunities for many individuals in many different circumstances.
Right.
But I don't know. Okay. Then fine, it's a personal preference.
We're on a nice intellectual swim here. I love it. I was like saying intellectual. This is like speculative technology, which is I love, and but this is not science fiction anymore. This is just about when. When will it happen, right?
Yes.
I mean, JJ, think about this. You can't see it. Okay.
I can't see it. Yeah.
All right. iPhone. Can you imagine you had that in the year 2000?
No.
You would literally be a freaking like alien. Oh my God. You record, it's your phone, it's your camera. You can send message. You have like this full touch screen thing. That was just like 20 years ago.
Although back in 1993, so this is like at the infancy of internet, right? 1993. So back then I was doing Amway, believe it or not. Anyway, and so I would go to these regional meetings and national conventions and all that stuff. And there was this particular speaker that belonged to my particular upline. Anyway, that's jargon talk. Anyway, once one of the speakers was saying like how, in the near future, that we'll be able to go on the computer, order stuff, and virtually try on clothes and all kinds of things and order, and it'll get shipped to you. And I was like, that's crazy talk. When is that ever going to happen? This is 1993. Yeah. And not that long ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I don't know if people figured out the whole, I mean, those are like product sales stuff. I mean, it's like Warby Parker, right? All these people do that already. That makes a lot of sense. It's augmented reality, right? But like the social stuff, I don't know if anyone figured it out, how it was going to play out. And it's still not played out yet. Like how people still have to meet others. I think people still want to more or less be married. I mean, at least in our country, it's not the case worldwide. There's going to be major assumptions, traditions that are going to go by the wayside. Like marriage and having kids, all this stuff because of technology, in my opinion, and, overcrowding, world population stuff. And it's just, it's moving very fast, to your point. Like technology is accelerating things at a rate that is faster than our biological minds have been taught to adapt to. And that's something to notice. I don't know if it's like a concern, I guess, other than if the outside world adapts faster than we're capable of, then we're gonna extinct ourselves, in some fashion. But I don't know. I mean, we're in this still nice balance, I think, of technology meshing with our biological traditional needs, and hopefully we keep a reasonable pace or progress on that. I don't want it to become Matrix. I don't want it to become
chip in your brain kind of thing.
Well, the Borg attacking the Federation, like where they're trying, Terminator, right? That's like the dystopic kind of notion of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, and when I saw the Manti Te'o dating in love thing, I go, wow, I don't know what's possible anymore. I literally think that every generation shocks the previous one, and generations are now more condensed. They're now 20 years or sort of less. There's like technological generations, which are almost like every month. We're we're dinosaurs in that space now. I mean, even the 10-year-olds think that the 8-year-olds are like, you know, or the 12-year-olds are like poo-pooing on the 15-year-olds as being out of touch, you know. I mean, that's what we're dealing with. And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know what to say. I stop controlling it and watch the parade and see how you feel about it. I mean, now I'm going back to like original topic around my grandparent, who my grandfather was born in 1917. Can you imagine what he must have thought of the world prior to last, months ago? Like I can't even imagine. He grew up in a freaking grape ranch at a time when going to Japan was a 2-week boat ride.
Mm-hmm.
A boat you had to be on, right? And there was no computers. There was calculators,
Let me tell you, the more I dig into history and the further
Yeah.
back in time I go, the more
Yeah.
astounded I become at the amazing things that people were able to accomplish without modern technology.
Sure. They got to
Yeah.
the moon,
Yeah.
like
I mean,
like
even before that, like before computers, before anything.
before air
And
conditioning. I thought about
before
that with my grandfather. How did they live here before air conditioning? It's so freaking hot. Like,
may,
how do you live? Like, I don't know. I don't know. You
you
can't
get
function.
used to it. You get used to it.
It would change my diet. First of all, there are bugs, right?
Yeah.
Now there isn't, like, you'd have to, adjust your diet. You pretty much only be able to do certain activities. They probably wouldn't be cognitive as much. They would, it's so hard to focus when it's too hot
Yeah.
on this kind of stuff, but you can
Yeah.
do manual labor thing, probably be in the water a lot. You probably
Yeah.
condition your diet to be like insect repellent-y, right? Like a lot of spicy foods.
And
So
you don't do a lot of things in the middle of the day. So that's when you have siesta, right? You kind of like
well,
go
it's middle of the
under
day right now.
yeah,
Yeah. But
under the shade.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know why. And some would argue this is just a waste of time, but I love thinking about those things. I
Yeah.
love understanding how the mesh of time, technology, place, weather, all these things shaped a culture. This is like that Germs, Guns, and Steel book or whatever.
Yeah.
All that stuff is so fascinating to me. I guess it's, what is this? Sociological, anthropological mix. And I don't
Um
know why. I don't know why. It just is. It's just
it is fascinating though. It is fascinating because it's also like your natural environment also sort of how it shapes food and culture and or even language and all these things that we think of as human experiences, you know yeah, all these things. I think some time ago, I I don't know how old I was. I began to realize how, uh, at that time, I was thinking food and language are sort of like the biggest, for me, it was the biggest indicators of how people in certain cultures, how they think, what they value and things like that, just by looking at the food and culture. So food, not so much these days because everything is flown around and things are grown everywhere. But you know, indigenous plants and uh, um, and what have you. I don't know. I just found it interesting. I don't really particularly have a point.
it's fine. It's fine. Um, so I want to just make sure, I know we're technically topicless, but like in terms of
Yes,
the initial
I
interest you had in connecting with me was around my grandfather and family.
yeah.
Did we kind of touch on most of the things
I
that you
think
were
so,
interested
but
about?
I think maybe a good way to wrap this up is maybe share some of the photos that you sent me,
Okay.
and we could sort of talk about that. Um,
Sure. Are you going to screen share?
I am.
Or, I mean, I
Yeah.
can screen share too, but go ahead. Yeah. Okay. Okay. What would you like me to talk about with this? And I
Um,
know it's illegible, but that's partly
yeah.
the design. I don't want people just like Googling. You can Google everyone now. I don't want people to, but
Maybe we just skip over this part other
oh
than
no.
like
I think the color coding is useful here. Okay, so the
okay.
top purple boxes, you see those? Those are my great grandparents, Kichi and wow, I forgot my great grandma's name, but they were the first. They're called Issei's. They were the first generation to come to America, and they had the pink boxes. Their 10 children. Okay, So the pink boxes are their direct descendants, of which my grandmother would have been, I can't move my cursor. No, you can't see mine. It's the third top box up across the top. There's like two that are on top of each other,
Do you
but
want me
there's
to
one.
which
Uh,
one?
it's not, okay, the far left is the first, and there's two on top of each other is the second. The third box, there should be my grandmother,
Oh, okay.
Fumi.
This
Is
is your
that Fumi?
grandmother.
I
Do
think
you
that's Fumi.
do you see
Yeah,
my cursor?
yeah.
Okay.
I just can't, I can't read what it is right now. I'm pretty sure that's Fumi. Let me see. Yeah, that is Fumi. And she's the fourth of 10 children. What was fascinating, okay, so they all, my great-grandparents owned the farm in Seattle. The farmland they originally had was seized by Boeing Aircraft, and so Boeing now owns it, and there was an airfield built on it. That's the other picture I sent you.
Mm-hmm.
But they were farmers, and this was about early 1900s, literally 1900 to 1920 or something. My grandmother had, the three of the first four children were female. And so what was going on then is, firstly, her oldest sister, the first child, got married at like 18 or 17. And part of that was part of the times, that was what you did. But part of it was the oldest children ended up being the parents to the younger children, because the parents were, working all the time. And basically the daughters were the mothers to the younger children. And they're like, I'm tired of this crap. And so like, get me out of here. So they were looking to fly the coop as soon as possible. So that was the case for Sakae, who's the first oldest daughter. It's also the case for, you know what? You want me to share my screen really fast so you can see some of these words? Okay, why don't you take it off screen share? And then I will.
I think I have to give you permission. Hold on.
Yeah. You just need to get off screen share. I can actually, let me see.
Yeah, I'm
host
off
is disabled. Yeah, you're gonna have to.
I think I gave you permission.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Okay. Okay, so can I not zoom? Oh, you know what? If I'm in that mode, I can't zoom here. Okay. Can you see this?
Yep. Oh, nice. I could actually read it.
Yeah. Okay, so my great-grandparents, I want to maximize this screen. Okay, so my great-grandparents, Kichi and Shio, they were married in 1903. So everyone's marriage dates. This is my grandmother and grandfather, married in 1932. So this is what I found. And I was just like stunned, right? You can see all this right here. Mm-hmm. And then the next generation, because that's the pink, are the direct descendant generation. And then the blue become their children, right? Mm-hmm. So that's my dad right here, Richard. You can see the cursor. And then we are the green, John, Eddie, Audrey, Gary. Mm. And then finally, yellow is the fifth generation kids. So if you look at this picture here, it's color-coded based upon the generational movements. And there are a lot of us, and they all gather. Let me see. I don't have a.
What are the white boxes?
They're not direct bloodlines. So my mom.
Oh, those are spouses. Okay.
Yeah. See, my dad, Richard, but she's not directly connected to Kichi and Shio. She's yeah. All right. So so this is impressive, and something one of my aunties has been curating for a long time. This is my grandparents right here in the center, 50th wedding anniversary, where these are all the siblings here. This is my grandma, this is her sister, this is her sister, this is her sister, this is her sister. These are her brothers, 1, 2, 3, and then this is my grandfather. My grandmother had 10 siblings. My grandfather had 9. Wow. So here's my grandfather, his sister, his brother, his brother, his brother. There's a ton of them. Here's me right here. my little brother, my older brother, and my sister. And so these are, like in that org chart, are most of the people in it right here.
It doesn't look like you. I would not be able to spot
changed.
you.
Yeah. But along with the org chart came these incredible photos, like, look at these. These are my family.
Yeah.
This bottom right here is my great grandfather. He's on a pig farm. That's his oldest daughter here, and there's pigs. This is one of the family members who lived in Wyoming also, and they ran a laundry business. This upper right is my grandmother's brothers boxing in the like this Little Rascals style thing, because that was their era. I mean, like, this is the farm in Seattle. This is the oldest daughter getting married. I mean, look at this gothic looking whatever that, it looks like a 20s like silent film, right? But that was what they were. Their idols, like say our generation might have been, well, I won't say mine, was like Leonardo DiCaprio or Brad Pitt. For them it was Rudolph Valentino, you know, Clara Bow, you know, Charlie Chaplin. Well, he wasn't really a hero, he was just a star. But Gary Cooper, my little brother's name is Gary, you know, for Gary Cooper. So yeah, so that was like, you know, and here's the opening of Boeing aircraft, Boeing Field, as they call it, Seattle's first airport. This is not a stock photo. This is from my family, because they were right next door. They just like, you know, it's like they built it. This is an actual photo of the first flight from Boeing, who's now a major airline maker, right? Airport. This is my grandfather. You saw this before, and his gardening truck in the 30s in LA. You know, he had his own route. He had his own thing. He's one of these old trucks. This one was a great find. It was my grandfather. He's right here at the arrow circling. In 1934 with his construction crew in Manzanar concentration camp, which is in the high desert. It's like east of Yosemite on the other side of the mountains.
How did you even identify that this location was Manzanar? Was it like written
It
somewhere?
said it on the back. It said
Okay.
Manzanar 43, some date too. And then I found my grandfather, but I also didn't know he went to Manzanar. He went to Tule Lake, which is on the Oregon-California border. So I actually then went to this physical site and sat in the exact same spot. I compared the mountain photos in the back, because the mountain ridge stayed the same. And it was like the same. It's on my Facebook post somewhere. I was gonna actually give you a screenshot of it, but I couldn't. I sat right there. It looks a little different, you know, but it's pretty similar. You can tell it's the same place. I showed this to a park ranger and they said, oh, that looks like the reservoir. So they showed me it there, yeah. This is, again, this is my paternal side. My grandfather was not able to be reunited initially with my grandmother, who was a US citizen. And because he was born in Japan and lived there for like the first 3 years of his life, they had to petition the Senate, and they finally succeeded in this private law 468, which is an act for the relief of Roy Y. Shiomi. It's kind of cool to see your grandfather's name in code, and it allowed them to reunify. And this is just a screenshot of the Spokane story about Roy being reunited. I have the longer form somewhere, but I just found that. This is Randall Park. You see him right here, right there. Here, the brown, yeah, carrying the gun. It's a fake gun. This is Achievers. This is our, all of us went to UCLA together, and we decided to do a first production, because at that point, you know, he was just working a graphic arts job at some local newspaper, and he hadn't really fulfilled his talent and promise in acting. And so we did this 99-seat theater play in 2001 together, and it was not reviewed well, but it was like a start and got him to be seen by certain agents, and I think that helped his career. A bunch of these people are now really big in Hollywood. This guy right here, Hugh, he went to film school with John M. Chu, the Crazy Rich Asians director, and they actually, I think they did G.I. Joe together. I don't know, maybe something before that, but he's like a pretty big producer now with him, Randy, and this guy Mike, who was the writer of the play. They're big. I mean, he's a show lead writer, and Hugh's a producer, and obviously Randy's the talent. And so they started their own production company. But the thing that's really interesting about this group is Randy, in addition to these two other guys, Dave and Derek, started this Asian American theater club on campus called LCC. It stands for Lapu the Coyote that Cares. That only means something because they all did this thing called UCLA camp, summer camp together. And that was their nicknames, Lapu, Coyote, and Cares, right? And it became a huge, like it was so impressive what they did. Right? Prior to that, we did all these like Asian culture shows, which were like plays, you know, I did like one on internment camps, but this was like a serious production. It was like a really, really good script. And that organization, after we graduated, I think even maybe 2 years later, that became the springboard, and she talks about it for Ellie Wong. Ellie Wong was in this troupe, and I think that's how she took off. I mean, she was already talented, but LCC is where she got her chops at UCLA as an undergrad. So it's just my run-in with Linsanity stuff. I mean, a lot of people had it, but like I'm friends with the guy who did the documentary for Jeremy. He also took me to Jeremy's last college game, which was kind of cool. And then obviously I was in New York during Linsanity, and CBS interviewed me because I was running a basketball program for youth. And I talked about Jeremy Lin. It was so funny.
So that's another connection. I had forgotten that you were on the board of Apex. So after I came back from my travels, I got a message from my former colleague at the Japanese company, saying, no, actually, this is while I was still out overseas. She said that Michael Lee had asked about me, who was the executive director of Apex at the time. Yeah, because I think I updated my LinkedIn saying that, I'm on a sabbatical. So he was looking for a communications director or some.
Oh, to work at Apex.
Yeah. But
what
I was
year
over.
Was this?
What?
What year was this?
I was out there in 2017. So I think you guys were you guys were looking for somebody for 2018, I think. I'm not sure. So I messaged him and I said, hey, I'm overseas, but I'll look you up when I come back, because I didn't know exactly when I would come back. But I did come back like just a couple of months later. And then I forgot about it. But then in 2018, it's either 2018 or 19, you guys actually posted a job opening for communications.
I kind of remember that.
Yeah, and actually I did interview. I had a phone interview with the marketing person at the time, and he looked at my resume. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I think you're overqualified."
Marketing person.
They were looking for somebody significantly junior.
Yeah, very junior. Yeah, I think we were. It's more like a budget thing. We couldn't afford people that were experienced. Okay, wow, how funny.
Yeah.
What an overlap.
And then I think it was around that time that I was looking at the Apex website and looking at the board members, and you were on it. I'm like, oh, I know this guy. And then I think you took over the ED position temporarily for a while, right?
Yeah. I was interim because Mike left, and so I had a nice run there because I oversaw the gala, which had Gemma Chan, and Olivia Munn, and it was like super cool. So I put that because I really I love Gemma Chan. She's like awesome.
I don't know who she is. I'm gonna have to look her up.
Okay. Well, did you see Crazy Rich Asians, that movie?
No, I didn't.
Oh well, that's fine.
Okay.
But that was a really incredible moment, not in Asian American history, but in Asian Western white country history.
Yes.
Because it was the bringing together of people who I think have more in common than even like say me and Japanese person. It's people who are Asian complexion, who live as minorities within a predominantly white culture and share a common language, English, So it was Australians, Asian Australians, Asian, whatever, like British, like Gemma, Constance Wu, it's Asian American, like all together on this shoot of this movie. And I was like, wow, that's so touching. Like all these diasporas come together, Aquafina, right? It was incredible. It was so touching from a larger context point of bringing together. It's almost like me connecting with my Brazilian, Peruvian, Japanese family, It was just so touching. And I don't know, that's the context in which I look at it a lot of times, and what an accomplishment it was. There's still a lot of work to do. Gemma's career hasn't really taken off. It's not like Henry Golding, who seems to be doing much better, and Aquafina for sure. That role was originally offered to Ellie Wong, but she declined it.
Oh, really? So, why?
Yeah. Well,
okay, never mind.
Off the record, I can go off the record, but let's say Constance Wu is a very difficult person, and I think all of Hollywood knows it. And I think there's folks who didn't want to work with her. Let's just put it that way.
Well,
So
it's not off the record anymore. You said it on recording.
I know. I'm aware that she's difficult. So, there's the casting stuff is very hard. Aquafina stepped in, she took it, and man, she's taken off. She's taken off.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So anyway, yeah. So that was that. Let me just go forward from here. Okay, this is like some pictures with Andrew. I was trying to look for ones before Venture for America. I mean, his wedding in Puerto Rico was one. And then the other two are Venture for America pictures. But I never would have thought Andrew would ever run for president. When he told us like he's running for president, we're like, of what? Like everyone's like, of what, right? And
well, I'm glad he did, I think, because I think he brought to the national conversation, several things.
Yeah, I mean, he's formidable. I mean, he can seriously do a better job than our current mayor, I think. And he's,
oh my gosh, I don't like our current mayor at all.
Yeah, not many do. I just think, I just know he can do a much better job.
Yeah.
It's difficult for me because I have a lot of friends in politics, and there's sort of like a queue for those kind of roles. But he's cutting in line, really. But
that's ridiculous. I mean, I know that's how it works, but at the same time, no.
Well, it's then no one needs to vote to like run. I mean, like he's never voted before, and he's never like there's all these things which generally track you to being more empathetic to others. That you have a ramp up for it. Like he's not that. He's just really smart, and he's really a quick learner. And what we need right now is like someone who would just be good at the job. I think, and so I think he's the strongest candidate out there. But I have not actually paid it super much attention to it. So I don't know. But it's kind of cool that someone you had a long time of experience and whatnot with is possibly going to be mayor of your city. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. So that's that. That was me and Gemma. Oh, she's so great. Anyway. That's it. So yeah, I mean, I just put up some photos, but I think this was the really relevant one, which entered me into Ancestry and got me into all this, is the discovery of that side of my family. And then, like I said, in this binder, each of the pink boxes is a self-made autobiography that's detailed and explains.
Wow.
And then, the binder also has subcategories where the family's photos are and talks about a little bit more about what they are and what they do. So I learned a lot about getting older from reading the biographies and notice patterns, particularly when a parent died or got sick, and how siblings stopped talking to each other, which is really tragic. That's
recorded too?
Well, no. It's verbal. I'm like, oh, how about this and this cousin? It's like, oh no, they don't talk to each other. It's like, what? Why? Well, they had a falling out when the mother was getting ill and people, blah, blah. Oh, and how about these? No, they don't talk either. It's like, well, they had a falling out because of this parent, this and that. I'm like, geez. So you learn things, you learn things because you have people that are related to you and stuff happens. So it's cool.
Do you want to stop sharing?
Oh, screen share, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Did I just do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
You did. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Fascinating story. And I like all the sort of the side trips that we took, meandering about different, subjects. And well, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
Oh, so you did want to talk about your paternal grandmother, I think. Yes, paternal grandmother.
That's gonna be long. That's long.
Right. Do you wanna come back and talk about her at another time?
You can do that. Yeah. I definitely gotta. Yeah, we're an hour over, I think, our time frame right now. But yeah. But,
I might have to cut this episode into two parts because the platform I use to upload the thing, like if it's over 3 hours, it actually says the file is too large. So
whatever you want to do.
It's okay.
I appreciate our meandering conversation. It's kind of fun. We talked a lot about digital, the implications of technology, which was not anticipated. I thought we were going to talk about grandfather, but no, it's cool. It's cool. I'm very into podcasts. I'm like that is actually the backbone of what fueled Andrew's success in the early presidential campaign.
Yes,
right? He went through
definitely.
alternative media because the other media were asking him to pay for ads and sponsors. And he was just like, no, I'm going to get my message out through other means like Joe Rogan and others.
I think the first podcast he did was Sam Harris, and Sam Harris introduced him to Joe Rogan, and then after that, like it just snowballed from there.
Yeah. So it's cool. I mean, now it's another version of how Andrew could not have been a legitimate candidate prior to that, and so I love this. I love how this is why I'm very hopeful, and I'm seeing the positive sides of this technology and what it's doing, but it's sort of like I always dreamed that the West was still open. The historic physical landscape of the West. This American dream where the people from the East, the crowded East, move west and have a new frontier for exploration and stuff like that. Like for me, the West is digital, not in person. There's so much Wild West going on with this stuff.
Definitely.
That's what it is now. That hope that I would take a horse and carriage and go off and explore and find like Yosemite and Yellowstone and all these great, that's not there anymore. It's the digital domain that's really creating possibilities that's really wide open, particularly if VR and AR become more developed. I'm really excited about that as something to look forward to. It's really cool. And this is, honestly, this is an example of that too. So thank you for inviting me, JJ.
Yeah, this was so much fun and unexpected. I was actually surprised that you responded like that quickly. I'm like, okay, cool. That's awesome.
I learned that working with Andrew. You got to respond immediately, like got to respond it's been fun. I think, it'd be good to hear your stories too. Let's just say that. And I hope at some point you're able to do that. So this is something everyone should do. I don't know if I actually have a scheduling break, but I intentionally created a scheduling break in I think the last week in May, where I'm going to interview myself. So only technology makes that possible.
Where I get to tell my side of the story. So it'll be the podcast me interviewing the musical me. And then, the musical me will also ask questions to the podcast me. So it'll be like back and forth. Yeah, it's gonna, I hope, I don't know. I think at the worst, it'll be goofy.
You might want to, you can make it interactive and have people like ask you questions, and like you have to draw it out of a hat if you want to do it that way. Because
no, I don't. I think I'll do that maybe a little down the road. I mean, part of the reason why this is recorded is like I don't think I'm quite ready yet to like interact directly with the audience, because I'm still sort of gaining my sea legs, into this whole thing. And so I think at some point down the road, these won't be pre-recorded. It'll be actually live streamed. I don't know. I'll have to figure that out. Yeah. Or maybe some of it will be live streamed and some of it will be pre-recorded. Who knows? But
exciting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I'm so glad you did this with me. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Totally, JJ. Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
And come back anytime, open invitation, whatever you want to talk about. And we could get all like heady too, like talk about like all kinds.
That's awesome. And let's get the audience up from 11 to like 20. Your thing. No, it's fun. Like I said, any opportunity to connect with people and tell stories for me is always fulfilling. So thanks for inviting me.
And good luck with continuing to explore your family history and all that. If it does become a book or a movie or something, I can't wait to see it. It'll be awesome.
Yeah, the big thing to explore, it's not as much the document or the screenplay of my grandmother's story. It's the mystery around the origin story of my family, because we still believe my great grandmother was the housekeeper in my great-grandfather's house, and he was actually married to someone else. And the reason we came to America on that side was because of the shame, which is probably a very common, no, it's so common.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
come on. Oh, are you kidding? If you ever do the Ancestry stuff, first of all, Ancestry in this country is the domain of Mormons. It's like a Utah Mormon thing. They're mostly really into that space for some reason. There's something cultural that they do it.
Huh.
But if you just do that, there's a site where it's like people who did their genetic test and realized they're not actually the child of certain parents that were their parents. Just as common is the story of like, you know, family members who, you know, the reason they came to America was through the reasons that I just said, like, you know, she got the housekeeper pregnant, and that's my great grandmother, and they had to come to America because they needed to leave that part of Japan because it was too scandalous, right? So I don't know for sure, but there's a way we can I can figure that out, but I haven't been able to go to that part of Japan to like dig up documentation. But you know, it just makes life fun, right? I mean, it's cool. I mean, it's the past. I want to also focus on my future, but to understand the origin story of your entire line in America is still very meaningful and rich for me. So I want to.
Yeah. Well, you're fourth generation in. So I mean,
they count it differently though. Japanese count it differently. We're third by many more normal counts, because the first generation is usually the first born here. But in Japan, it's the first generation to come here.
Right. Yeah. That's how we count it too. I think
so I'm third by your counting.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, you're third generation American. Yeah. Okay. So I'm first generation immigrant, because I was actually not born here, so I'm first generation. Yeah. Right. My nieces and nephews, they're second generation. Yeah.
Yeah.
But still, third generation. Cool. Yeah. But anyway,
cool. All right, Jay, gotta run, I think. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Did you have some final thing?
One quick thing. I've been asking my guests to do this. So would you tell the audience to subscribe to my channel?
Oh yeah. Please subscribe to Beer Cake, JJ Ko's awesome podcast channel. Is there a click somewhere on this
Yeah, because this will be a YouTube, so it'll be, subscribe.
Subscribe, click here to keep up to date on new episodes coming forward. So please do that, and JJ will continue to bring the goods.
All right, thank you so much, Eddie Shiomi. Thank you. All right, and JJ. We'll keep in touch.
We'll talk. Okay, bye.